Mayor, are we ready?
Certainly.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the meeting to order. Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Here.
Councilmember De La Cruz.
Here.
Councilmember Gross. Mayor Lindsay. Here. Councilmember McCormick.
Here.
Councilmember Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Petros.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Mayor. If we may please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Standing for the invocation by Father Juan Carlos Pagagua from St. Agnes Church.
Almighty and eternal God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the food that you put on our table. We thank you for the opportunity to serve our country. We ask you tonight, dear God, to give the wisdom and courage the members of this board to lead us, to guide us with the best decisions. We ask you also to give us, to all of us, the strength to listen, to let ourselves be guided, and to become one for the best of our community. We ask this in faith. Amen.
Amen.
Next item, Mayor's brief comments by council.
Yes, Frank.
Well, first, I think we had a good night last night. And I think that as a result of both the process and the decision, we can feel more perhaps relaxed, even though we know we have to get to work soon and we'll have to be very dedicated, diligent. And a lot's going to happen in a short period of time, but it's still good. Last time we talked about the reported move of the NOAA fisheries facility from Virginia Key. A resolution and draft was circulated. Mayor Lindsay will meet tomorrow with representatives from and from NOAA. We'll finalize the reso and we'll adopt it, I suppose, at the next meeting after we hear input. The preliminary input was good, accurate, but let's see what they have to say tomorrow.
Absolutely. They've articulated that they have some asks that we'd like to make sure that we incorporate them into the reso as needed, and we have that, the benefit of that discussion.
Right.
So thank you for doing that. And anyone else?
Next item, Mayor's public comments.
Bell, Bondergertz. Yes.
I'd like to wait until we're further along.
Fair enough, and it's so when we are addressing the ordinance.
Thank you, yes.
Sharon McClatchy, also. Frank and Karen Egan.
We'll wait until they discuss that ordinance.
Fair enough. Any other public comments?
Just a question, what ordinance are we?
Kite surfing. Next item, please.
Next item, approval, deferrals, additions, deletions, substitutions, withdrawals.
Yes, please.
Discussion item, could we put a potential council liaison for the manager search firm?
That item would be 10A11.
It's a liaison between who? Council and?
Council and like if we said like talk to Jenny, if we felt that it would be good to have a specific.
Wait, I think we need to talk about it and we'll talk how the process was before
Yeah,
because
that's
it
what I
was,
wanted.
yeah, absolutely. I would like to actually pull the Fast Track Institute resolution. The principals are very interested in presenting and they were not available today. And so it will be for next meeting.
If I could just suggest and request that it be presented as a discussion item instead of an action item, so that we have time to absorb their presentation and try to correlate a letter of intent with something that we can vet in advance. I think that would be good process.
Yes,
Mayor, I have one addition and one deletion, if I may.
yes.
The deletion will be under 8A1, 9A, removal of the code compliance vehicle discussion. I'm tabling this item. And I would like to add, under manager's report, a discussion regarding the bus and athletic usage of the bus. We have some interested parties that would like to start using our bus on a more frequent basis. I certainly have discussion items that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to add a discussion on the master plan for parks and public spaces, which I think dovetails to some of the other discussions we're going to have, so let's have a comprehensive discussion.
I'd like to
Go ahead.
pull the first item, which is public broadband. I want to give the task force an opportunity to look into this before we even do that. And they'll start meeting tomorrow, so.
And the engineering firm is going to address that heavily.
Right.
Yes, Frank?
We'll need to vote on all of this, but I think that the ordinance that these people have come to speak about tonight is far from where we need it to be. Too far, I think, to deal with it on the fly and make it work as I think we intend tonight. I think we can do this next time, but I think we need to do this with some reflection, more so than we can afford ourselves in the next 4 hours. So I suggest that we table that. And also, I believe we should table the Kimley Horn contract to give us a chance to consider their initial scope of work more fully than we've had the ability to do since last Thursday. This is an important and expensive proposition, and I think we need to vet this a little bit more carefully.
Can I, as far as the kiteboarding ordinance, and I completely agree with you in its entirety, my concern, which is where we started before, is that we're still not moving forward on a way of regulating some even component of this, and maybe giving a directive to at least get a registration process in place, and I don't know how a registration of the borders and some control within our boundaries. So how do you envision that, and how, is there a way to split this so that we can?
Can I make well, can we at least move it to a discussion item, or did you want to keep it as an ordinance? And
No, I'm fine with that, but I mean,
I'd like what you're saying, and I think one step beyond that, and we can do this tonight, is to clarify some direction for the police, at the very least in terms of what we clearly intend to do. But what this draft still does not quite precisely say. And I think we probably should do that to remove any lingering ambiguity as to how we're treating this pending the adoption of this ordinance at second reading.
So why don't we keep it on the agenda, discuss and table?
That's fine.
Okay, that way we can have a meaningful discussion, but we don't necessarily take a vote if the council doesn't feel it's ready.
And then we
But
can,
procedurally, we're doing things correctly.
and that would include avoiding the need to renotice.
Correct. And I would also say that for the Kimley Horn, we need to have some kind of discussion, and we don't, if we want to also table the resolution and bring it back, that's fine, but we need to discuss these
That's
things
fine.
and not just
That's fine.
push it back. Anything else?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Mayor, is an ordinance on second reading. An ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Chapter 4, Boats, Vessels, and Watercraft, regulating kiteboard use, amending Article 2 of Chapter 4 by the creation of Section 4-33, kiteboarding, providing for codification, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
If we move in second and table, that gets us where we want to be, and then we can talk about this?
You move and you second, you discuss, and then you table.
Chad, I believe we continue it.
You can just make a motion to defer to a date certain, and then that will be fine for advertising purposes.
And with discussion.
And
Yeah, you can have discussion on it.
can we allow for their discussion during
Yeah, it's,
our discussion items?
I would think so.
Because they're all, and they came, yes.
Well, I'd like to move to bring this to February 13.
I'm not sure if this is appropriate now, and I know this is completely out of order, but if Michael Davey submitted comments that he wanted me to read into the record, and it has to do with the Kimberly Horn contract, if I can do it now or at the time.
We're going to have a discussion about that.
right now, we're talking about,
I know, but I just wanted to make that a point.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
So there's a motion to adjourn this till February 13.
Got it.
Defer, not adjourn.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Now we discuss.
so you can discuss it, it's fine.
I mean, I think just to lead off the discussion, there's a lot of this that I feel like we have some consensus on, specific to the regulations of the people that are actually operating this. Obviously, the big problem is where are we going to designate an area that isn't going to impede the safety of our residents. So Brett and I actually met and discussed some of the finer points of what is before us. And he had some modifications, trying to tighten up the language of the specifics of the regulations of the boarders who are riding. So I'm going to defer to you to speak specifically about that.
Okay. Thank you. So from the ordinance that's in the agenda, I made some amendments, and I'll just go through the main points of what my amendments were, what they were about. I think the definition of a kiteboard, we can use the state statute, but I think that we can define it more clearer so there's no difference in there, and I think that's minor. But under the definition of operating or operate, I think we need to add on the beach as well, because I don't think that you're only in operation when you're in the water. I think when you have these kites up and you're not on the board and you're on the beach, you're operating something at that point. So I think that needs to be clearly stated. One of the biggest things that I think is important for enforcement and to be very clear is to put a section underneath the prohibited water activity and put under there prohibited beach activity, where it is very clear that it's prohibited to have the kites on the beach, except in the zone that we're locating. And then in the next section of is 433, would be below that, would establish the rules and what can be done. And one of the other aspects that I wanted to add in there is the resolution. I think that some of these things could be set by resolution. I would like to get maybe just kind of feedback from the council, but I think that limiting or establishing a reasonable registration fee, limiting the number of registered persons, setting the time and seasonal use of the channel are three things that are definitely, for me, can be done by resolution, which makes it much more flexible for us to adjust it, to move it if we need to. If it's not working in some way, we can have some flexibility there. The other two items was limiting how many kites are in a channel, and which I don't know if I really agree with at this time, because I don't know how enforceable that's going to be on the side for our police. And the other one is establishing the the actual location in the resolution, which talking with our legal, with Chad, our legal counsel, says that it's probably better if it's in the ordinance, and that's, again, something that we can discuss there. The only reason why I thought of the resolution is just the flexibility. If we find another spot in Bill Bags or something, it's very easy for us to make an adjustment there. The last thing, there was a couple small amendments in here I think that you guys saw. It's really just cleaning up some small issues and language. But the last one is the sunset provision. And the way it's written in this ordinance, for me, just absolutely does not work. We are where we are today. This is, and what we're trying to do is move forward to having either a place that works for kiteboarders and beachgoers. And the other option is that we have if it doesn't work, it's just not allowed on our beach, and the kiteboarders would have to go to Miami-Dade County's Crandon Park and use theirs if it doesn't work, if we find it really can't work and it's unsafe. Those are the only two options for me. I don't want to go back to where we are today. And I think that, and the way the ordinance is written is saying that this entire ordinance that we're passing today is going to sunset in 1 year. And I think it is, we either don't have any sunset provision, and that means whatever we're going to pass is going to be the law. And if it doesn't work, we're going to have to come back and make adjustments to it. The other option is you put a sunset provision that only sunsets the section that allows the exemption. And if that sunsets, then it's just prohibited on the beach after that. And basically the sunset provision makes it, I believe, a little bit easier on our end, because if things are going good, it's very easy for us to come back and say, you know what, let's get rid of the sunset provision because everything's going well. If it's going bad, we don't need to do anything. It will disappear. That's the only reason for it. But if the council feels that it's not necessary, I'm fine with it. But for me, the most necessary thing is the prohibited on the beach activity.
Yes, Gary.
I think all of those points and a few that you didn't mention, because we haven't talked about it, obviously, are very important to tightening this thing up. And what it really does is it does tighten it up. It makes it easier to enforce. It puts more limitations on it. However, if we kick this down to February 13th, now we've got nothing. So I want to ask a question here. As a temporary measure, and since this is a second reading, could we simply amend this to say that kiteboarding will only be allowed on our beaches in the area that we've designated, because I don't think that anyone wants to change that. And then we come back on the 13th and amend that with the tightened up rules. Because every time we push this off, we basically haven't done anything to control the situation. And I don't want to make a mistake, but on the other hand, I think that we can at least partially put something in place that does the largest part of what we're trying to accomplish, and then clean it up after it's done in the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Well, we've tabled the ordinance, so we'd have to bring it back.
Correct.
I know that.
Okay.
And that's why I'm suggesting what I'm suggesting
And
now.
amending ordinance from one meeting to another, we would have to do, is not so easy.
No, I
Greg,
mean,
you may want to speak to that.
it would take two readings, but you could adopt it on second reading and have something on the books, and then we can start another one, and we'll take, an amendment of an ordinance will take 2 readings. It'll take 2 meetings.
Well, I mean, the question then becomes, is it better to push this whole thing off? Because remember, it's got a 45-day kick-in period after we pass it. So is it better to push this whole thing off with nothing? Or is it better to pass this as an amended version today, limiting where kiteboarding will be allowed? And then we can have the next ordinance with the 2 meeting requirement and pass that to tighten it up even further. But at least we've done something. It may sound like it's kind of cumbersome, but we keep deferring this and
and I
deferring
agree
it and
with you.
deferring it, and I think we need to do something.
But I would think that if you change the date from the 45 days to the 30 days for the next reading, you've almost achieved the same thing.
I agree.
So that's where you can tweak it and not kick it down the
I
road.
would rather do it like that.
Okay, that makes
it right.
sense. That makes sense. If we can put that in as an amendment.
You know, that we can tweak with, or we can even say 20 days.
Yeah.
You know, and that, then we've lost no time, because I completely agree with
Well,
you.
the question is there really any reason to have a waiting period, whether it's 45 or 30 or
No,
20?
no.
Let's just make it effective immediately.
Absolutely.
So
And
the
then we've
reason,
really
Absolutely.
accomplished it.
so as a matter of law, it can be effective immediately upon adoption. The reason for the grace period in speaking with staff was to give the staff the ability to set up the registration, to purchase the streamers, to give them some time frame. So, you know, that's within your purview, but that's where it came from.
Understood, but they already know exactly what we're going to be doing and can be working on it right now. So this will be between now and the next meeting, lead time for them to get those things in motion. We're not changing any of that.
Frank?
Yeah. I think that while it's tempting to think that we could make this work on the fly tonight, I don't believe we even have a consensus understanding of some of the assumptions and predicates that have led this draft to take this form. And I don't think we've come to a clear understanding, despite our efforts to do so, of how this interacts with the vessel exclusion principles that are already in place and have been for years. And I don't think this interacts, and maybe it doesn't need to be, but on face value, looking at Section 3102, I think it needs to interact with our beach management plan. And there's lots of strictures that apply to beach management plan prescriptions that don't apply to this and can't. So if we don't tailor those two things, we will have an incompatible statutory setup, I think. Beyond all that, what I wanted to get to is to direct the manager to do the registration package and to set that up tonight so that we can anticipate what the registration application is going to say and how we're going to have registrants certify their level 3 status and their insurance and their acknowledgement that we have a code and these rules and regulations and that they're agreeing to comply with them by pulling this certification. And I'd also like to suggest that we figure out a way right now to reinforce the message that this is not a lawful activity. Well, let me back up. We've observed that this is either regulated and unlawful, or unregulated and unsafe, or in any event, unsafe, regardless of whether it's regulated or unregulated. So I think we've come around to trying to get out of a perfect circular ambiguity on what we have now, and we haven't done so. I find it hard to adopt a correcting ordinance without knowing very clearly where we are now. We'll get there. But I've got some unanswered questions about that and about the interaction with the beach management statute. But to get off the dime tonight, I think we can adopt or get the manager's office to start adopting the regulatory compliance paperwork and figure out how to purchase the streamers. We'll only need 100 of them. And to the second point, if we were to direct the police that our interpretation right now, which is not perfectly consistent with the beach management plan, but is absolutely consistent with where this ordinance has evolved, is that launching kiteboards anywhere on the beach to get out 300 feet is not consistent with our regulation as it exists today. And that if they're going to launch anywhere, the only place we might look the other way in the meantime is in this area that we've identified preliminarily as a safe launch zone.
Chad, can you, because I'm not sure that I agree with everything that Frank said, and I just want your
As
opinion.
I've tried to explain before to the council is that whether or not you consider it a vessel or not, it's, in my opinion, irrelevant because the council in 2005 adopted a resolution saying that non-motorized vessels can go perpendicular from the beach through the vessel exclusion zone to get out there and have, to their activity. So Whether or not you call it a vessel or not, I don't think that's a correct assertion.
We're not hung up on that. We think,
No.
we want to be accurate, but that's
No,
not
but-
what's hanging us up.
But the current, but just so you know, that whether, I understand that, but if it's a non-motorized vessel, then people are allowed to go from the beach perpendicular out 300 feet and then do their activity out.
But it's almost impossible to do it with a kiteboard.
Okay, but there might be a case that it can, I hear you, but I'm just telling you that just in general terms. So I don't think by directing the manager to take certain action, I don't think that would be appropriate. You can't do that. You have a resolution on the books that's allowing people to, if you're considering it a vessel.
I disagree with that because we are anticipating adopting an ordinance in a couple of weeks. We were asking him to take the steps that will enable the implementation of parts of that ordinance to be ready to be implemented when it becomes effective.
Well, that's different. That's directing the manager to purchase certain goods and to integrate certain systems to have the ordinance in place. That's different than directing the manager to enforce a law that's not on the books.
So we're not, I don't think we can do that, and I'm not suggesting that.
Okay, maybe
What I am, so let's just try to parse this way. The area off of Grand Bay is clearly subject to a beach management plan, right?
Correct, and they have a beach management plan, and non-motorized vessels are allowed to go out from that area.
And one motorized vessel for emergency rescue.
Correct.
Is
Similar
there
to
any
the
other
Ritz.
allowance anywhere on this beach, anywhere within the village, that allows a non-motorized vessel, recognizing that windsurfers and kiteboarders, not kiteboarders, what do they call it? Paddleboarders.
Kayak.
And
Kayaks.
kayaks and rafts.
And rafts.
And floats and those little bicycle things that you pedal, go out, traverse the beach to get to the surf, to get out in the ocean regularly.
So my understanding is that the Ritz-Carlton has a beach management plan with a dedicated channel that allows for non-motorized vessels to go out with one motorized vessel for emergency purposes.
When I said Grand Bay, I meant Ritz.
But they were two separate plans, just for the record. It's clear that I believe they have two
And that's
separate.
because they have a concession,
So
or they have that services, it's part of their
I don't know the background. but
telemenities.
The only other plan that I'm aware of was the Sonesta, which did not seek to have a channel at the time, even though historically they did have one at the time, they did not seek to have one. Now,
Okay.
That's negated because the Sonesta's gone.
but the last element of it is that also occurred, all the beach management plans all occurred at the same time as the resolution I was referring to before, which allowed non-motorized vessels to go through the vessel exclusion zone.
Perpendicular to the beach.
Correct. So to answer your question, I'm only aware of one dedicated channel, which is at the Ritz.
Right.
As well as this other resolution that I'm referring to, which is not a channel, but it's allowing an exception.
So I don't think we can travel under the beach management statute because that requires a hearing, and we don't have that hearing before us tonight. We do have whatever you're referring to from 2005 that allows perpendicular traverse. One of the problems is that we've come to discover empirically that kiteboarding is not an appropriate operation to take advantage of that perpendicular traverse because of the deployment of the kite and the need to deal with the lines where there's bathers and waders and surfers and everything else that happens on the beach.
Well, that might be the case.
It is the case.
I mean,
It is plainly the case. So the question is, if there's absolutely nothing that we can do to specify the zone other than telling the cops that's what we intend, and they've heard that, they're sitting here every night listening to us. And on February 13th, we're going to have an ordinance in effect that's going to locate that permitted traverse there. And they are already on alert that this is an unlawful activity elsewhere because they've been trying to enforce this activity for years. Does that work?
I don't understand what you're
No.
suggesting.
It doesn't.
I think Chad's telling us that
No.
it is not an illegal activity.
It's not exactly.
That's the problem, see.
And I don't know,
In his interpretation,
That's not the interpretation that we came to in 2013. I'd never heard that interpretation before this came up.
I'm just
at first
telling
reading.
you that,
I,
that
We came up with the opposite interpretation in 2013, and we've all seen the tape. And we thought about it at the time methodically.
Excuse me, I've got to interrupt right here, and I don't do this, but I have to. Here we go again. We're not going to be able to do this by the 13th. We may not be able to do it by December 31st. In the meantime, I want to bring this back as an ordinance that simply says, from now on, starting today, or whenever we want to start it, kiteboarding on our beaches will be limited to the area in front of the Silver Sands, which will be the channel. Further amendment upon further notice, but at least we'll have something on the books. It's totally enforceable. It is a law. We can do it tonight, and let's spend however much time we need to fix it. But if we don't have anything on the books,
But to fix it,
let's just,
2 readings.
No,
No.
well,
Who cares?
to fix it does take 2 readings. However, I think what Gary is suggesting is to just adopt, and I don't know,
amend the existing
to amend the
one, pass it, and
existing
bring it back in a year,
ordinance
not to fix
to
it.
amend the existing ordinance tonight to just dedicate the channel
yes.
and then leave everything else for further debate.
So the limited purpose would be just to take, 432, and add a paragraph. That's the already drafted paragraph that identifies the location.
That's right.
Which would be,
And then we can take whatever time we need to fill in the blanks, fix it, get all of these unresolved issues resolved, but have something in place that protects our residents, protects the beachgoers, and gives the kiteboarders a place to legally practice their activity. That's our main objective. All these other details are, to me, irrelevant to accomplishing the main objective, and we've got to get it done. We can get it done tonight. Let's stop dilly-dallying on this thing.
So if we were to add, the point that Brett made earlier is correct. It needs to deal with the beach as well as the surf. If we were to add the paragraph that identifies the location in 432, exclude all the other stuff, and amend the prohibition section to extend that to the beach for launching and recovery, other than in that location, I'm good.
wait a minute.
So you want the kiteboard channel map 434, and prohibited beach activity.
Prohibited
Would be
beach
the amendment.
activity would say that with respect to kiteboarding, as a subspecies of everything else, you're limited to that location, and the launching and recovery, the
Prohibited beyond the beach
methodology,
anywhere else. Yeah.
it extends to the beach as well as the water.
but
those two
which map are we looking at? I mean,
The one
the
that
map
was
that I've
sent.
seen has
It's a whole nother,
100, 150, 200.
John,
So let's pick our zone.
I would never go over 100 feet.
No.
I would go 100 feet max, and that's it.
So,
Done.
I mean, we do need to agree on which map it is that we're looking at. The other thing that I have an issue with, that we should consider, is how far into the sand are we regulating here? That's all, you know what I mean? Because, I mean, is it all the way to the
Dunes, maybe?
Well, they can't, I think 3102 says you can't interfere with the dunes, period.
Gotta be in front of it.
So all the way up to the dunes, is that what we're saying?
I think short of the dunes.
Yeah, just short of the dunes.
Okay, so
well,
the
why don't you
area is
just,
going to be full of
wait, why don't you just say it says it,
kites.
the erosion control line?
I think we should limit the number of
That's a
kites that
question.
can be
Where's
in
the-
that area on the beach.
Yes, I absolutely believe we need to do that, you know.
of course
because-
they need
We're
to
going
be
back to the whole thing.
That's
That's
a good-
putting
that's a
in
good-
too much for tonight.
Okay,
Gary.
but I see what Gary's saying, which is,
Just get the
let's get the
location.
location and move on.
Okay, so
Done.
Can we
the
do
north-south
number tonight,
width
too?
is 100 feet, demarked by the, the red lines.
Yep.
The west line is the erosion control line.
Can we limit the number of kites allowed on the beach in the zone at any one time tonight also?
I think we have
Because if
to.
we're trying to do something that is gonna be safe for people on the beach as well as for the kiteboarders, and have them in their spot, you should also limit how many are there.
So
Because we're not doing a registration process yet.
we projected 10.
Mayor, did we have some public speakers? Maybe should we listen to them quickly?
Yeah, we will, are you all feeling like you want to?
Before we pass anything, maybe
Are we okay with the number
When we
10?
get our amended motion
10 seems like a
down
lot.
This is
pat,
do it,
still
okay.
tabled as an
Then-
ordinance, and so once, if someone wants to bring it back,
Oh, we have to bring it back in order to have public comments?
There's
Yeah.
gonna have
Well, I
to
was under the
be,
impression that we were going to do public comments either way.
well, but there was just a sudden shift at 180, so I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
trying to get our bearings.
So we got to
So
get it
I'm
out of adjournment.
I'm just trying to
there's
figure
gonna
out
be a
what-
motion for reconsideration.
I'll take a motion to reconsider.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
I will now open this ordinance up to public comment. Our first speaker is.
Are you
Dr.
following what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I'm fine.
And I don't know what you're gonna address at this point with your two.
I'm Don Ellisberg. I live at 177 Ocean Lane Drive. Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, Village Manager, Village Clerk, et al. I'm going to be extraordinarily brief. I think what you're trying to do in terms of an interim stop until you get it fixed is terrific. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it will give everybody ease. It'll give somebody a place to go play appropriately and let everyone else relax while you go through the problem of putting all the little pieces together. And so I commend you for getting to that step of simply, as I would say, stop it until you get it fixed. Thank you. Any questions?
Our next speaker are Franklin and Karen Egan.
Hi, good evening, all. We're residents down here part of the year, so I'm playing a little catch-up on this.
Name and address, please.
I'm sorry?
Your name and address for the record, please.
Your
name
I
and-
can't hear anybody up there.
Name and
Your
address.
address for the record, please.
Oh, sure. Frank and Karen Egan, Key Colony, Tidemark.
And I just want to add that we have actually been property owners here since 1972, first in the Commodore Club and then in Key Colony. So we are not new to the Key.
Appears that a site has already been chosen. That looks like a foregone conclusion. I don't particularly like it, but that's neither here nor there. I don't particularly agree with let's get something done tonight and work out the details later. Sounds like we're letting the cow out of the barn before and then the fire starts. I just don't understand that mentality. If you're going to propose something, lock it down, get everything in place so that you understand exactly what the regulation requires from anybody using that facility on the beach. And not let's push it through and come back later and find out some other things. Personal opinion. My question also would be, that becomes village property now, correct? That they're on? These kiters are on? It's village property, the beaches belongs to the village of Key Biscayne?
The village is public property.
The only part that we can regulate is the beach property.
Right.
It's the.
So if someone gets injured, then the injured person sues the village on my taxes? Is that how it works? I think that's a question for you. And then the second one is, if you're going to have people registered to be out there, do they also carry additional accidental insurance?
Of $1
So
million.
that they injure someone? Okay. Okay. Who regulates all of that? The police? I mean, are you guys going to come down and look at everybody's registration card and say, okay, proof of insurance is here, they're registered? All right. Is it just for Key Biscayne residents, or are we going to have people piling in here who say, hey, great place to go, and then where do they park? Okay, just on the local streets and track their stuff in? I have a lot of questions that I'm not hearing answers to or discussion
there are
points
answers.
to your point.
Okay, there's
We've had
a
many
lot of,
discussions on all these
And then I
issues.
say, I'm new to the game, so I
but
apologize.
please note that
There's a
we have
permitting
addressed
process.
these.
Yeah.
And I have 51 seconds. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I am, preface my comments by saying I am not opposed to kiteboarding. I mean, I am an active sports person. When I am in Key Biscayne, I walk the beach every day. My major concern, I'm really opposed to a site that has so many people going back and forth. I mean, my major concern is the safety, and I am particularly concerned because on a personal basis, a couple of years ago, right at that very site, I was walking, and the mast and the whole kite came down right in front of me, and I mean, after, I truly thought that I was not going to survive. I mean, I really thought I was going to die. I mean, I was trembling afterward. So, I mean, I'm really concerned about the safety issue for people on the beach.
And as we all know, 90% of these people will be very careful, and then you have the 10% hot doggers who probably don't even live on Key Biscayne and just want to show you how high they can jump or anything else, and don't particularly get concerned about the people walking on the beach. We're out of time. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sharon McClatchy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilman. I'm a neighbor of yours. Commodore East has been my family's residence since it was first built in the 70s.
Your name and address, please.
Oh, I apologize. 177 Ocean Lane Drive, Sharon McClatchy. Thank you. I have also almost gotten wiped out by a kiteboarder a few years ago. I commend you for moving forward with this because we're getting into the busy season. Well, I see people coming in from over the dunes off my balcony from Crandon with their kiteboards to do it in front of Commodore Club East. And then they sit on our chairs and they spread those strings, I call them strings, across the beach. You can't walk anywhere. So I just think it's increased enough. It's a beautiful sport, but it's not safe. And I cannot sit out there and read and then walk down the beach without hopping over lines and worrying about the kiteboarders who don't worry about me. So thank you all. And I was dismayed when you started putting this off, so I hope you will do something. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Belle Vondergoltz.
My name is Belle Vondergoltz. I live at 177 Ocean Lane Drive, the Commodore Club East. I am one of the board of directors at the Commodore Club East. I was also, my heart stopped when I thought you were going to push this off once more. I feel that something has to be done about the kiteboarding. We have watched it go from 5 years ago, we had maybe 1 or 2 boarders in front of us. Now we can have anywhere from 20 to 30. I think that while it is beautiful to watch from a distance, I feel it is dangerous. And there are many incidents worldwide that would attest to that. I hope that the designation of a channel will alleviate the kiteboarding that is going on the rest of the beach. Frankly, I don't know why the kiteboarders are not satisfied with the site they already have. To my mind, I can only attribute it to convenience. It's not convenient for them. Whereas spots right in front of our building and elsewhere along the beach in front of residential buildings are more convenient. There are maybe 100 kiteboarders on Key Biscayne. I think we have almost 12,500 residents. And I think we really need to think where our priorities lie. We cannot be all things to all people. And I really think the safety comes first. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nancy Ellisberg.
Nancy Ellisberg, 177 Ocean Lane Drive. I too have seen the video going back to February of 2013, where Steve Helfman explained that a designated channel was necessary. For me, this has been kicked down the can in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, until December when we had the workshop, and now a proposal to maybe extend it till February of 2018. Katie, you have said this is a safety hazard. That's what we've all been trying to tell everybody through all those years. I think you have two choices. You have the choice to pass the ordinance that you're going to try and see if it works for a designated channel that you were told in 2013 you needed, or until you get it right, you have a moratorium. Those are the decisions. I think if you ask your attorney as a safety matter, if you have the authority to direct that this is a safety hazard, it can be stopped as of yesterday. I think if you decide to put up a channel, or if you decide to have a moratorium, the sign that the county is going to put up again at the dividing line between Key Biscayne and Crandon Park is going to state that on Crandon Park, the only place where kiteboarding can take place is at the north end. I think we need a sign that goes right next to it that says either until further notice there is no kiteboarding on the Key Biscayne beach, or until further notice there is kiteboarding where the Sandbar restaurant used to be, or 500 feet to the south of here.
Thank you. Our next speaker, is Ignacio Segurola.
Good evening, Council. Ignacio Segurola, 881 Ocean Drive, 18E. I had several things that I wanted to say tonight, and most of them are moot now. You guys have really started discussing everything that I thought was important. One of the things that really concerned me the most was the delay in enacting the ordinance as was discussed. Councilmember Gross, I thank you very much. I wholeheartedly support something getting done tonight to get something on the books that's effective tomorrow. With the caveat that this issue stay on the agenda for the next meeting and any future meetings until all the wrinkles are worked out. It is very important to get something done now to address public safety, but there are a few issues that I think still need to be added. Specifically, as Councilmember McCormick brought up, I think if it's not done tonight, it must be done in the near future. The number of people that get streamers and the number of people that are allowed on the water at any given time. Those are two things that without a cap, it could turn into a free-for-all. Potentially anybody in South Florida can come to Key Biscayne, buy a streamer, and want to come on the water. Practically, it might not be effect, but who knows? It's something that should be addressed. But just with the number of streamers and people on the water and the enactment, I believe most of my concerns are taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Mariela Sochetti. Is that pronounced correctly?
Yes. Hi, Mariela Stocchetti, 155 Ocean Line Drive. Well, I will talk on behalf of the Key Biscayne Kiteboarding Association. Fernando couldn't come, York either, but we want to let you know that we already officially, we are implementing temporarily and in show of good faith effort, the Sonesta corridor. We already have the streamers. We are already give them away. They have the name, the last name of each of the kiteboarders, and there is a code that is the last 4 digits of our phone. So we are already, if moving forward, there is a kiter that doesn't have that is not part of this association. We understand the concern of everyone, but I think that helps in this session, the implementation or the expedite of the implementation. So moving forward, even if there is no consensus of what you are deciding, we will implement it anyway. I am not sure if you are going to discuss the hours of to allow the kiteboarding, but there are a lot of us that work, so, take that into consideration that, if we work 9 to 5, we will not be able to do it, and that is part of our lifetime balance. So, well, we wanted to show our commitment and understand that the concern and the efforts that you're putting, and we really appreciate your help and in listening to us of what it was said at the beginning, to listen and to understand everyone's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Katie.
Okay, having heard everybody and the gentleman that came up with his concerns, I feel like what we've done here is try to address all of these issues. And I would like to propose that we actually pass this tonight, that we use the channel that's 100 feet, and that we see and we start the registration process, get that in place. Maybe the manager can tell us how quickly we could actually get people registered through the village, because I recognize the registration through the Kiteboarding Association is great, but it's going to need to be registered through the village so that the village can enforce it. And I think we can bring it back, and if there's problems, then at least we've given an opportunity to have this coexist, which we've never done before, and we have a specific area, and I think that this discussion has gone on long enough.
Katie, I agree.
Does your motion incorporate the adjustments, the amendments on there, or is it what is in our
I'm
packet?
fine with that. I would also, I think some of these things that you said should be in a resolution. We could pull out, which are hours of operation. I don't know if you want to include in the ordinance a restriction on the number of registrations to 110 people on the beach. It's a try. It gives us a control that we aren't registering more than 100 people that can even kiteboard on our beach. Can we do that, Chad?
We could do it by resolution as well, right?
Yes.
You can do it.
Okay.
We shouldn't.
Because the amendment that I have
That
in here
shouldn't be here.
says as by resolution, we
Okay.
we can limit to.
Right, we can, and I'm sorry, Lucho, you wanted to.
Can I second her motion? She
Yes,
made a
please
motion,
second,
I
yes,
think, right?
yes.
Yes.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay. I just want to know what we're voting on, because I'm not clear. The document that was circulated earlier today or yesterday, I made some comments on, which were mostly cosmetic, but they should be looked
So
at.
maybe we should just real quickly rehash it so that everybody's clear on what we're voting on, and then take a vote.
Let's get it.
I will probably not support this because I think this is so poorly done, and I just don't like to do things that way. So I will suggest this. If we were to adopt this, if we were to adopt an amendment to section 432 to say that 432 as written extends from the beach 300 feet east, and that new sentence, kiteboarding, as defined in either the Code of Federal Regulations or the state law, whichever is the right definition, will be operated only in the channel that we define right now in this section, and that only 10 people bearing streamers reflecting their level 3 certification will be entitled to operate a kiteboard at any given time. I would support that. And I would kill the sunset because it doesn't work, because the sunset as written reverts us back to this circular ambiguity we've been trying to get out of.
And
leave it there or then
Leave it
come
there,
back?
and then come back later, because we do have to adopt, I think it's appropriate to do so by resolution, everything else that we have consensus on, but just not worded right or completely, in my opinion.
We know that whatever we adopt tonight, we're going to come back and change. It can either be the very simplistic version that you just laid out that I could completely support, or it could be your original motion that I can also support, because whichever way it is, we're going to make changes to it. So let's just get one or the other done and move on to some things.
I'll support mine, but I won't support the other.
And I'll support yours too.
Well, we
And I
have,
will too.
folks,
Fine.
we have something, we have a motion that is pending for a resolution.
Can you clarify for me? What we're doing is ending at 432 and
We're only
adding
amending
language?
432, and what I was thinking is that so 432 is written, begins, no owner, operator, person, blah, 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 in command of a vessel shall permit or operate within the area of the Atlantic Ocean. We have to include the beach. So shall permit or operate a vessel from the beach within the area of the Atlantic Ocean extending 300 feet east of the beach.
I'll say including the beach maybe instead of from the beach.
Including the beach, that's fine. And then the rest of it is fine. Now we add a sentence that says kiteboarding, as defined in whatever the proper definition is, will be operated only within the channel that we define in this section. We can say further, if you'd like, that the kite will be deployed only immediately prior to entry of the water, which is part of the resolution that we have to adopt later, and that only 10 kiteboarders will be permitted to use the channel at any time.
And are we going to then keep the insert channel map section where?
Yes, we have to, because that defines the channel.
But you're saying that whole section of kiteboarding, you're saying that we're going to do later in the resolution?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. As long as we can enforce it. Chad, I just want to make sure it's enforceable with, and I don't know if Chuck needs to come up here and just make sure.
I want
Can I
general
just ask-
liability insurance.
Well, that's the registration process.
I really think that, and I don't know why everyone's so hung up on it being a resolution versus an ordinance. I really think that there's certain things in here that are easily done by resolution, but I think others should probably be in the ordinance. I think it's the better practice to do it. But, it's hard for me. If you want to, I can go down every single one, but
Is it enforceable the way that we're talking about?
I think what Frank is describing is enforceable. Effectively, what he's saying is that there are only 10 kiteboarders permitted at, I guess, one time.
Well, let's think for a
And
minute.
it could be any kiteboarder then?
It's not just traversing the channel. Let's clarify one thing. It's kiteboarding. Certainly, so here's a detail, right? If you have a parade of 10 followed by another parade of 10 all day long,
At one time.
and there's 1,000 kiteboarders, that's not what we intended. We intended 10 to be utilizing this sport, to be performing this at any given time.
Okay,
I want to make one other comment. If we're going to do that on section 432, I would like the title to say prohibited water and beach activity.
I think that's great.
Can we also, at this point, in this sort of skeleton ordinance, include no lessons?
Yes.
We're going to end up with the same.
I know.
Well, I mean, what are we?
Well, that to me is the challenge.
So we're not gonna register. We're
I
not gonna
don't
deal
wanna-
with the people. We're just gonna deal with the channel and the
We can do a
restriction.
resolution at the next meeting.
I don't want to adopt this as it's
have to
written.
do it
because
in the next
That's not the way I'd like to work. This doesn't make sense.
The way it's written is impossible for me to vote for. That's all I can tell you.
Okay.
So, I mean, if we can do it this way and then work on a resolution for the next meeting, then.
Well, we can do it this way if we don't continue to write the ordinance from the dais, because the proposal is to very simply limit this activity to the designated channel that we have a map for right now. We can continue to add for the next 12 hours things to it. We know we're going to change it, hopefully by the next meeting. Let's just get this passed So we have a channel designated where it's limited.
Will you accept this as an amendment to your seconded motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wait a minute.
She needs to accept it.
Gary accepted it.
I will. I mean, I'm.
Yes. Good pressure there.
Why don't you call the roll?
Wait, hold on, no. I think we need to restate this. First of all, in 4-32, you want to say that no owner, operator, or person in command of any vessel, remove the word kiteboard, or no?
Yes, remove it.
Okay, so shall permit or operate a vessel, remove kiteboard again.
Yes.
Okay. Within the area of the Atlantic.
Including the
Including the
beach.
beach.
All of this, and then the rest of it stays the same.
The rest of it
And then
stays
you
the
want a
same.
second sentence that says that kiteboarding as defined in Florida law, Florida statutes, shall be prohibited, except within the channel.
No, it's kiteboarding is permitted 300 feet out. It's the traversing of the kiteboard to get 300 feet out.
So kiteboarding is
Will only be operated within the channel.
correct.
It would.
No, they will body drag out through the channel so they can kiteboard past the vessel zone,
But I think,
vessel exclusion zone.
but I think body dragging for me is still operating the kiteboard. That's how it is.
Operating the vessel, it is.
It will be launched, okay? It's called launching. It will be launched.
You don't want them.
No,
launching
you don't
at the
want them
beach.
launching standing up.
This is.
Okay, so here's.
It does matter, Gary. I get
Here's-
it's annoying to be in the weeds, but we can't put
Launch.
something.
Launch incorporates their launching.
Here's the
by body
solution.
dragging.
Here's
That's
the
how they
drafting.
But it's too broad. They
don't-
then
they don't have
different
to.
ways of launching.
How about this as a drafting solution? Kiteboarding, as defined in the state law, will be operated only within the channel and beyond the 300-foot, it's basically the swim-only zone. Because that's true.
Yeah, that's fine.
The kite will only be deployed immediately prior to entry.
Well, now you're starting to.
Well, these are the details that we're adding in. 10 people only, right?
Got that.
And Allison, what was your other suggestion?
We need the body
wasn't.
dragging through the zone.
No lessons.
No lessons. It's not the body dragging because body dragging is operating. We don't need to get.
However, I think it's important to have a distinction because you don't want people not body dragging through that zone. Because that's where they lose control. The body dragging is like taking a boat through a no-wake zone. It's a controlled speed where they are much safer. If they,
So your point is that if we don't make that distinction, it allows kiting out under power.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I take the point. I think that's correct.
Yeah.
I
So
think
that was
that's
the whole
correct. Okay.
All right, so can I make a suggestion? Why don't you leave in the definition of body drag in the definitions, unless you have heartburn over it? Change the kiteboard definition to say as, we'll say it as permitted, as provided in Florida statutes.
Right.
But we'll have to change it to kiteboarding, because the Florida statutes definition is kiteboarding, not kiteboard. And then we can keep the other, definitions too, as written. And then go on to the rest of the stuff.
That's okay. That's okay with me. The only question in the definition of body drag through the kite through the water, it's really while the kite is inflated and the point is you're not sitting, standing, or lying on the board, you're carrying the board.
Well, it's submerged. The board is submerged.
the board's
This
on
doesn't say
the
that.
surface and the
The board
body.
is
Carrying.
Yeah,
you're
they're
carrying the board. You're partially submerged because you're walking.
Frank, I think the idea that you said at the beginning that this was to give clear direction to also our law enforcement, should we have Chief Press just make sure he understands this and it can be enforced?
I think that's fine. He's going to say yes, because what you're saying is you have to stay in this channel and you can't power out and you have to body drag and you have to be 300 foot out. But if he wants to say that, I'd like to hear that.
I just want to make sure he understands everything clearly.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. As far as the definition goes, it's a little ambiguous to me. When we talk about 10 kiters, is that a total of 10 allowed on the beach at one time? Is that 10 in the channel at one time? Once those 10 traverse the channel and now they're out, can 10 more show up and 10 more after that?
No.
But if you see where I'm coming from, you see how it's difficult for me to kind of discuss with the officers and tell them what and how they can actually enforce that part of it. As far as if they see somebody violating the, dragging versus mounting violation, we could do something about that. And any other clear violation that would normally go within that 300-foot zone. But when you talk about numbers and other things, we need to be very clear on that.
So that's the conversation.
And how do we keep the 10 people who got there first, and then the 11th person shows up, but those 10 are already out and they're partying out there?
And they go pretty far out. Sometimes you might not be able to see them.
That's what I'm saying. How does he know that they weren't a part of the Dade County thing and they decided to go up and down the beach? And then we're ordering him off the beach, and he's got the tag, and he's a registered kite surfer.
That's one of my many problems with this as drafted.
There would have to be 10 total streamers out there.
But how do you count the streamers?
I mean, they're going to be.
Right.
This is,
I don't
Generally, our
think-
cop is going to find them on the beach.
I mean, think about this, guys. Do we care how many people are kiteboarding past our vessel exclusion zone? No. What we care about is how many kites are on the beach, because that's where our bathers are, and we care about how people are getting through our vessel exclusion zone. So those are the areas where we need to place a limit.
So I think that's correct. I think that.
So if you're counting kites on the beach and if the number's 10, if there's more than 10, then that's an infraction.
I think that's right, but let me just remind you, and I'm sorry to get involved in this detail because I think we want to get through this and move on. One of the reasons that we had the discussion about limiting it to 10 was because when you're recovering, for example, the weather turns bad. And there's a deluge of people coming all at once to get on the beach and off the beach. We didn't want that result.
I think if we were in that situation, we would probably need people coming in and getting directly off the beach. They can't stay on the beach. They would need to walk through and leave.
Can I remind us of one thing? We're not trying to do this right now. We're trying to designate a zone, one zone on our entire beach where kiteboarding will be allowed, and it won't be allowed anywhere else on the beach. That's what we're trying to do right now. On the February meeting, all of the things we're talking about now will be an amendment to what we're doing tonight, clearing all of this up, but yet we're sitting here right now trying to do it from up here. It's silly. Let's go ahead and pass the zone. We've accomplished 90% of our mission, and then we'll take care of all these details that we can't seem to stop discussing.
We just don't want unsafe people doing it through that zone.
But right now, they're doing it all over the place.
So let's eliminate.
Exactly.
That does work for us.
Yeah.
That works for us. Gary.
Just let him in, it's just for enforcement.
Okay.
So you want to eliminate the 10 person and just let's take a roll call and come back in February 13th.
So we're going to do the prohibited water and beach activity with the adjustment of 432 and locate the channel. That's it tonight.
That's it.
Yeah.
Let's just do that.
I think that you should also deal with the definitions. I mean, I think you need to include that too.
The
I don't
body
like
dragging.
the definition of body drag.
All right.
It's stupid.
Well, okay. Well, you can go with,
I want to propose
I
what
don't
I
mind-
proposed, all right? And I'd like to call the question.
I think that there was,
I think somebody else proposed it, and I think you don't have the authority to do any of what you're doing.
Well, I tried.
Still on Katie's.
Yes.
Well,
Ready to
no,
call the
I
question?
deferred over to Frank to do a portion of this, and I'm fine with that.
You amend your motion, maybe? And then,
How do you feel if we include the word body dragging without the definition and leave it self-evident?
That's fine. But I do think there should be body dragging.
What is your problem with the definition?
It's silly. It talks
this-
about you're carrying a board. It doesn't say that. It says something else that's, if you read the English words, I don't know what this means.
Can you focus
I
on
don't
the
think, I
zone,
mean, I
please?
don't think it's as eloquent as you are, but I think someone reading it understands it, Frank. Is it better not to have it, or is it better to have it?
Better to have it.
Let's have it.
I just think, okay.
I'll suck it up.
I hear what you're saying, but
Feel like
for the sense of.
Right, here we go.
So let's do that, and let's take a vote.
All right, so it's for kite, it's gonna be changed to kite boarding, right? As provided in section 32702 Florida statutes, that's where the definition is.
That's cool.
The rest of the stuff in the definitions is fine. In section 4-32, we discussed it. We're gonna, and then the immediately to deploy language, we're gonna have that.
And the no
We're gonna have
instruction.
No
Let's include
instruction.
no instruction.
And then it's really no more than 10 kiteboarders permitted on the beach.
I think
Kites.
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 How about no more than 10 registered? Can we do
There's no registration.
No
or anything.
registration.
No registration.
So no more than
About to
10
change on the
kites.
second one.
Here we go again.
Can we also direct the manager to get the registration process in place?
Yes, but not in the ordinance.
Not in the ordinance.
And I also think you should probably direct him, because if you're gonna set a permanent channel, there's gonna have to be buoys at some point to also go through with that process. But,
So let's do this.
and then, can I
No.
just finish? And then for purposes of the channel, it's the 100 feet with the western boundary, the erosion control line. And it's the 100 feet as shown on this map here, correct?
Yeah. Yes. And you said the erosion control line, right?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
That works. Let's do it.
Call the question?
All those in favor?
I think it has to be roll call because it's an ordinance.
For the motion. Can I do the motion and then
Yes,
call
yes,
roll call?
yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
For the Councilmember Petros's motion. Opposed? Motion carries. Roll call on the ordinance. Mayor Lindsay.
Yes.
Councilmember McCormick.
Yes.
Councilmember Moss.
Yes.
Councilmember Petros.
Yes.
Mayor Kaplan.
Yes.
Councilmember De La Cruz.
Yes.
Councilmember Gross.
This is totally out.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted on second reading.
Congratulations.
Bam.
That was an hour and a half.
It was
Next.
not pretty.
Next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, approving the individual project order for professional engineering services, providing for authorization of services, providing for implementation, and providing for an effective date.
So we have a discussion. We're not going to,
Well moved, and then we're going to table, and we're going to have the discussion.
And if I may
Second.
read into the record, former Councilmember
Yes,
Davies' comments.
Please,
so you need a second. I'll second.
thank you.
Thank you. This is on behalf of Michael Davey. My apologies for being unable to attend tonight's meeting. I'm sure you are all distraught at my absence. Of course we are. As the chair of the village's underground utility task force, I wanted to make a few comments about the proposed agreement between the village and Kimberly Horn. I understand that Councilmember Moss has recently met with the engineers, and there may be developments that render my concerns moot, but I'll put them out there anyway. This is one of the most important projects pending in the village. For it to succeed, we must ensure that every aspect of it is thoughtfully contemplated and planned out before the first shovel hits the dirt. So specifically, this project should move forward hand in hand with our efforts on resiliency and sustainability. That means we not only have to discuss the bearing of the utilities, but we should also discuss possible changes to our zoning and building codes, to our drainage and sewer systems, and our roadways, as those issues relate to our efforts to combat climate change and sea level rise. For example, I have heard a number of interesting ideas proposed recently concerning ways to combat flooding by replacing the asphalt we currently have on our streets with new materials that would improve drainage. That is an idea worth looking at, but it should be looked at now before we tear up our streets, not after this project is completed and we have to tear them up yet again. We need to have a global approach to this project. I bring this up because while the proposed scope of work contemplates some of the issues I have raised, it does not, in my opinion, sufficiently contemplate the coordinated effort that I believe is required with respect to this project. I strongly urge the council to ensure that the scope of work and timeline incorporate our efforts on resiliency and sustainability, as well as any other areas you might feel should be looked at now before this project gets underway. I believe that the responsible thing to do is to have a comprehensive plan in place that not only determines the what, where, when, and how of the installation of our utilities, but also takes into account our goals for the future of Key Biscayne. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, for reading that to the record.
Can you repeat that?
And Brett, I'm going to ask you to please give us an overview because just for the sake of all the residents that are watching and are going to watch this meeting, please.
So what we have in front of us is an agreement for us to hire Kimberly Horn, who has a lot of experience in underground utility design, engineering. And what we have, this document basically gets us through the master planning. It's a lot of what Mike Davey was talking about in his letter. It's going to be, and it's supposed to be, in my understanding, it is going to be a all-encompass, comprehensive master plan with our utilities, tying everything together. And the engineers are open to, and will be, meeting with us quite a bit. Council, the Underground Utility Task Force, residents, the staff members, to go through all the issues that we want to look at in a I can't think of the word right now, but in all the projects that we need to do out there. And comprehensive, but infrastructure. So all of our infrastructure type projects, sustainability. So in this process over the last year, I've been researching a lot Palm Beach because it's a very similar community, a little bit about 3 times larger project than what we will be looking at, and kind of been following what they've been doing and trying to learn in ways that we can improve our process. So I actually sat down with Josh, the project manager at Kimberly Horn, last week. I forget which day it was, and we spent about 2 hours going through the scope of services. And the first thing I needed to do was orient myself in the entire design process, and that was the first thing that we did. Because master planning is just a section of a piece of what we're going to get from Kimberly Horn. To give you a clear idea, is what they described to me is that the process is that the first section in the master plan, which is going to give us this comprehensive plan. And in this comprehensive plan, they will establish phases. And the reason why they're going to do phases is basically, I think one of the most important reasons is to minimize impact on residents. It also is supposed to streamline the process, the time process as well. And let's say, for instance, at the end of the master plan, they come up with 3 phases. And basically, they're going to divide the island into 3 sections and say this is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Once we say, yes, we want to go ahead and start this project, they will start the designing of phase 1 right away. And let's say that the design may take 1 year to get it all completely designed into construction documents. Then we will go ahead and bid that or have the contractor to start constructing phase 1. As soon as phase 1 starts being built, they will start designing phase 2 immediately. So they're now designing phase 2 while phase 1 has started construction. Once they finish the design of phase 2, they will then implement that into another construction project. So the construction projects could be going at the same time, but they're in different stages, and they can manage the traffic. And I would like to do more research, especially with the utility task force, about how that also affects our finance options, because finance can come at different times too because of these different phases.
Tranches.
So that helps orient me in where we are in the design side. Then I went through the scope of services. It looks to me that what we're getting in the scope of services is what basically Palm Beach received as a master plan. They had a 212-page master plan that included paving roads, adding new lights, whatever they asked for the engineers to add in there that had to do with infrastructure, they added it in there, and they put this into one big picture. It's up to us. We can piece it. We can say, look, okay, paving is great, but we do it at the same time or we don't. And what makes sense for us, or upgrading the light poles. Maybe we've done some of them, not done some of them. Maybe we want to wait. Maybe we don't. We can, decide what we want to do, but we have a plan that shows everything in front of us. So I don't see anything in the scope of services that is limiting this in any way. It is keeping it open-ended. There are meetings there. We did have a sunshine meeting just before this council meeting, and it seemed clear to me that at least the two that were in the room with me, and I'm guessing that this may be a consensus overall, that two things had happened. We did not receive Exhibit A, I believe it's called Exhibit A, which was the scope of services, until yesterday, which gives you guys a very, very limited time to kind of get into the details of this. And I believe that you guys may want to meet in person with engineers as well, and maybe ask those detailed questions that may take a lot of time up here in the dais. And if that was the feeling that I got, and I think that was one of the reasons why we wanted to maybe defer this to one more meeting, allow the council to absorb the document that's in front of us, talk to the Underground Utility Task Force, like Mike Davey, that had some concerns in there, let them sit with you, and then we bring this back in February 13th and get it done. So I'm confident with the right now, as the way I read it, the scope of services, but I think you guys should take a look at it and sit down with it as well.
How do we set up the meetings if we wanted to do it?
I think we can either do it through Jennifer, through John, or directly with Josh. I don't know what the best way. Maybe I did it with John, right? I went through the managers, or Steve. I forget, but one of you guys I called and got it set up. Maybe it's you, Jennifer. I don't remember.
I was able to read the scope, the Exhibit A, just barely, and I think it answered a lot of Michael's questions, but they are very valid questions, and if we haven't had the time to really analyze. But I think we're on the right track. Thank you very much.
I agree.
But again,
we have a representative here, don't we, for Kimberly Horn?
How are you? Do you want to come and address in any?
Maybe
introduce yourself, give us your contact.
An understanding, or points that we should be focusing on within this?
Sure. Josh Horning, I'm with Kimberly Horn. I'll be your project manager. Just very simply, the scope of services that we have proposed here is almost an identical version to the Palm Beach, obviously on a smaller scale. So it addresses, it will address any of the concerns that you all have as far as infrastructure upgrades, capital improvement projects in the near and long term. And unfortunately, the scope has been prepared for a month or so now. We had to update the schedule. We weren't able to do that in time on Thursday, so you guys unfortunately didn't get that. But pushing it off another month is just going to delay the process even further. And I know FPL has been putting pressure on, but we're ready to go when you guys are, and we've got people standing by. So.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely, Katie.
When you initiated this with Palm Beach, and I would assume a lot of times as you get into it, obviously communities find that they want more things to get done. And how do you have expandability within this to incorporate those things? And what are the problems that come up when you do that? What's happened in Palm Beach?
So the scope that we provided does include an opportunity for us to explore different improvements that you guys would like to incorporate. And we're absolutely open to whatever you guys want to add to it. Part of the problem that has occurred in Palm Beach is that they wanted to include so much that it becomes too expensive and a little bit beyond the reach of what, beyond the realm of what they wanted to spend and had budgeted. So what they ended up having to do is move some of those items that they wanted to upgrade to different budgets as part of a capital improvement project, not part of the undergrounding project, to kind of get the numbers where they needed to be. So that's probably the biggest thing with, for example, raising roads is a, if you do that over the entire island, it's an extremely expensive proposition. And so we can explore that and we can provide estimates on the cost of that improvement, but it may result in you guys deciding we're not going to do that, or we may push that to a later date.
But I have to tell you, that's what I was going to talk about. We've discussed at least pricing, getting you all to price it out, and I think that was part of the scope.
Sure.
Just a follow-up on Councilmember Petros's Palm Beach question. When Palm Beach had these lists of wants that they, how ready were they? In other words, had they had plans in place that they were able to just say very quickly and easily, or were they like, this is what we need because we planned 5 years ago that at this point we wanted to be here? Or were they able to do it quickly? Did you help them through it?
Yeah, anything that was presented, we would help them through, whether we had it in a short time horizon or long-term capital improvement plan. We would walk them through how maybe we could speed up some of those to get them in line with the schedule for the undergrounding project to help save that money up front.
Can I just ask, as a council, do we know what we want to include besides undergrounding power lines? Because we've discussed things, but when we're dealing with a project like this, I think it's going to be important to be very disciplined, and we may need literally a list of the things that we think.
I think we absolutely need a list, and
we haven't really defined that clearly, or have we? And
we have touched upon it, but we don't have that wish list. But I think it was more than power lines, it was all the utilities. I know we talked about raising the roads at that time, because there would have to be, I know we talked about upgrading the lighting at that time. And that's what comes to mind. I would have to.
Well, obviously, in addition to we discussed a fiber optic cable, whether we're.
And that's right, and the broadband and putting in, 15 additional bundles and maybe doing it ourselves. But that's just off the cuff. Yes, Brett.
I think it's a great point to come up with that wish list. If council would be. Would allow me to go to the Underground Utility Task Force to start putting that list together, maybe even talking to us as well.
Perfect.
That would be a great task to put them to start defining that.
Memorialize it, absolutely.
One thing I just wanted to add is that I think it's really important that we know what the outcome of what our expectations are of this master plan. And that's why I try to circulate as much as I can to each of us about what the Palm Beach got. And it's basically what's written here should give us that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be in the position in 6 months where people are upset because it didn't have something that we thought it should have, right? So I want to make sure that we're clear with what is going to come in this and what's going to be in this and what's not going to be in it. So please review this book, read it, and if you guys think there's anything in there that maybe we want to have in there, I think in this couple of weeks that we have, that since we're deferring it, let's flag it now and make sure that, hey, I want to see this. It wasn't in the other master plan that I saw, but I think we should see it, and let's talk to them about it.
Yep.
Do you all agree that this should be the number one item for a February 13th discussion? It has to get done. And we'll work on the list and we'll all interface with you to make sure that, I think you make such great points, and we need to, our expectations need to be set, and the time is now, and we can't dilly-dally and then, you know.
Just a question of thought. I don't know whether this is sensible. Has there been an executive session scheduled yet for the litigation?
Not yet.
If it were desirable to do so and we were ready, which I think we could be, if on the occasion of that executive session, we could hold a special meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't
We have an executive session to be scheduled.
Okay.
For the litigation, you
And
have
it's
another one scheduled on the 13th, if I'm not mistaken, at 6.
But I'm thinking in terms of doing this prior to the 13th, if we were meeting anyway, we could have a special meeting prior or to or after the executive session, but we could determine that.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I can canvass the council if you'd like by email tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's fine.
I think it's very likely that that's going to occur before the 13th.
Yes, and there's a workshop scheduled on February 6th for the sign monument.
The monument.
So that's another opportunity. If you want to do a special meeting, we'll all be around, I think.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all.
Good job.
And if I may, there was a motion to approve this resolution. I believe that was the mayor. If you can withdraw your motion, because.
I would like to withdraw the motion and table this item.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is budget process. Mayor Lindsay.
Sure. We are in January. We practically were done with our budget process, but we had some concerns and some questions, and so I just wanted to touch base with you all about what you would like to see in terms of preparation for our next budget process. And I know there were a lot of ideas before. So.
I think we, as a council, should come up with, again, another list of things and a priority where they're put in priority, and have an idea of how that will impact the budget. And if we have goals of, overall things, and give that to the manager sooner rather than later, so it can be incorporated.
In terms of CIP, or in terms of the process and getting through the process and having the information you need for budgeting?
This is more about what would we like to see happen in the next year, and how does that coordinate with budget? I mean, if we have specific goals for the village in the next year, and how that ties into the budget.
So would you like to do more of a CIP workshop where we're for the capital improvement projects?
I'm not sure. I'd like to hear everyone else's thoughts.
No.
So that I can synthesize because I hadn't really crystallized my thoughts. Go ahead, Frank.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for bringing this forward. It's good to do so. It's good to be ahead of this. I have two thoughts. The first is, during the last budget cycle, we pretty accurately, I think, projected capital needs for this year, this coming year. Nothing has fallen off the list. Nothing has added to the list. So we anticipated coming into 2018 what we would project doing in 2018. We need to do the same thing for 2019, obviously, but we also recognized last time around that these are multi-year. For example, the undergrounding is a multi-year project. What we'll know better soon is financing opportunities and best solution for financing at least that project, the undergrounding, and others conceivably. And so by, say, April or thereabouts, I think we're going to be a lot smarter about our cash needs for 2019 because we'll know better what we're going to be able to finance at what rate and project cash flows and all of that. So we should have this conversation. We're not ready to do it.
No, and this is just about a discussion about just to formulate ideas and process so that it doesn't, it doesn't
Right.
get, we get to that point and we haven't planned for it.
You're-
And during our budgeting process, we discussed the library, possibly, but there are a lot of things that are percolating and the
Your
strategy.
benchmark should be the 6-month review of the budget in early April. We would be reviewing what we have done the past fiscal year.
Yeah.
And we would be looking ahead because we would already begin projecting so that we were ready for the budget workshop.
Yeah.
So we would be bringing you the information at this level of discussion that I think that you would be seeking at that April 31st timeline.
Right.
That's right.
And this,
My second thought is it relates back to my very first substantive work experience with Mayor Lindsay, which included our getting together with Manager Iglesias and going through how the budget is built, how it's presented, what the words mean, whether parts are unintuitive and obscure because of the words that are used to describe things. I think we should all do that together again. And I think we should do it in advance of the budget season and not get caught up in the short grass about the numbers, but the presentation itself. It would be a good thing to do now. We've got a new manager who's going to be coming in. We've got a lot of changes in the village. And I believe you believe this too. I think we did a very good job with CHIP, but it was not as good as it could have been.
and we need to readdress some issues and make some improvements. And I do think we got a lot done. We got a lot done, and I think this perfectly, and I agree with you, dovetails into the next discussion item, but Gary's going to speak first. Yes.
I think since everyone's here has been through at least one budget cycle, one budget planning cycle, a good way to approach this is to analyze what about our budget process did we not like, what were we not happy with, what would we like to see done differently, as opposed to dealing with numbers and projects and financial needs, because that's all part of the workshop process.
Right.
But the budget process itself, and we've talked about this many times, is from everyone's comments, and it's not just this council, it's prior councils, the budget process itself is not really satisfying to a lot of people. And that's never really been defined with any specificity. And I think that if we can get down into the details of what is it about the process that we would like to see changed, it'll really get us a long way towards improving it and making it a different process. So it's more of a philosophical thing, maybe honing in on some specifics, but it's more of a philosophical thing. For example, should we have prior interaction with the department heads before they submit their budget? When I say interaction, I don't mean us meeting with department heads, but having some kind of an interaction with how they go through their budget process. I think and I have some very specific thoughts in my mind about what I'd like to see changed. Maybe that's one of the things we could all get together on and try to, coordinate and put into some workable document.
Just thinking globally, now my brain's going a little bit more.
Good.
One of the things that I think as a council we could think about is, for example, if we don't want our expenses increasing more than income, just as a general rule. And those are certain things that we could put in place to just give direction on a really global level to try to make sure that we're being reasonable moving forward.
We learned a very important lesson in 2015 about millage, and I think it would pay important dividends to remind ourselves as we get into this of that experience.
Absolutely.
Particularly right now when property values have gone down, and we probably will have less coming in or less increase coming in. And so we need to be a little bit more aware moving forward.
Yes.
Good. So we'll follow up on this item, but let's just kind of start.
How are we going to follow up? What are we going to do?
We will follow up. Let's put it on the agenda from a month from today as a discussion item, and let's submit list of what, and from there we can come up with a strategy. But it was just about having everyone think about the process, what worked, what didn't work, what needs improvement, and then addressing that so we're not at the same place in June and then September. We need to address it now.
And I'd like us to stay more big picture and
I
less
agree.
little picture.
I
if we
agree.
can, and that should be our goal.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Next item, strategic planning by department directors. Mayor Lindsay.
Sure, and this kind of dovetails into, I think, what Gary spoke to and Frank spoke to, and discussing or meeting with the different department directors and getting business plans, and not a PowerPoint, but actually have things be based on data. And I'm sorry, I hope that Theo is watching this meeting, but actually based on data. And, if you're increasing a position, how is it justified? What has increased? I know we made some decisions with certain departments in increasing staffing and stuff, and then I got numbers, and the numbers had actually dropped off by 16%. I will not ever do that again. And I understand that this happens, but it's not a best practice, and we should hold ourselves to a higher standard than that. So I think, and I attach what Miami-Dade does as Exhibit 5. It is very, very comprehensive. Their budget is what, 100 times larger than ours, or 1,000. So if they have 50 pages, we probably need 5. But there has to be analysis and thought and a strategic plan and a business plan as to what our departments are doing. It's not just add 15, and I'm completely generalizing. This is not necessarily what's being done, but just, our taxes increased by 4%. We at least have 4% we can cushion our budgets with. That's not what we want to see. We want to make sure that there's real thought and there's analysis of what's working, what's not working, what the trends are, what the goals are, and we just need to do better, and it should be done before, it should be done less picture, with data and graphs and clean narrative, and not, and efficiently and effectively, yes.
So I agree with you. I think having this would help us a lot. Just seeing the department strategic plans and even the cost benefit analysis, because, there's certain costs that come in, but it's very hard for us to understand how that's going to be incorporated into the future plan and where we're going with that. Where's the goal for this? So our goal is to go from A, but we want to improve A to B now. And for us to get there, we're asking for this cost, and this is what the benefit is. And then in the next year, it's good to reflect on where are we and how did it work? So I would be in full support of that.
In fairness, I'd like to take a moment to remind where we've come from. This will be my 7th budget, and I have submitted a budget process 7 different times, and those differences have been based on the input of council to make things better. Along with that, we were directed to seek outside guidance from subject matter experts, which my staff did meet with representatives from FIU, and we did go through that process. We've also been going through a process of self-evaluation. And I'm going to have Chief Eric Lang explain what we've been doing and what we have been continuously meeting on. And the fact that we've got 22 large-scale projects that staff was able to sit down with me during a retreat and come together with what we're trying to accomplish for this council and position this council to get more things accomplished this year than we did last year. And I think that we have been well into a process. Like I said, I want Eric to explain the Baldrige model, but we've been doing that for 4 years, almost 5. And so, again, I think you need to hear where we're at, and we would more than welcome the opportunity to come back with these people that are working with us so that you have a bigger picture. But in all fairness, what you'll hear and what I am supporting is the council will make, and you're absolutely right, Mayor, this has to be no more than 5 pages.
No more than 5, and
We've got
data-driven.
5 goals that that the council has agreed to direct the operational aspect of things, which is the budget process, so that we're all doing it the same way, seeking the same information so that you can get the dashboard that you need to go ahead and continue to either support or direct us. This is more about feedback than it is giving you information. Eric, give him a couple of minutes of the presentation.
If I may, because I wasn't done, and then please, Eric.
I'm sorry.
But, to me, it's also about, our directors are boots on the ground for services and quality of service and where we're going, in addition to the data-driven decision-making and analysis of where we're going and what the expenditures are and where they're justified and whether we need a new fire truck in 3 months, in 3 years or whatever, and have that. We also need to project for the future. So what I think, I would like to see is, and I don't think, I think a lot of the information's over there, but it's not being organized in a way that at least I could find is helpful as it could be to me and possibly to the other council members. And you may want to have, if you need someone from the outside to come and help do a business plan for budgeting process, some kind of workshop for the directors, and do a format, that would be.
In all due respect, I think it should be both the elected officials and the directors. To lay the initial
Gladly.
groundwork. And
Gladly.
That's what Eric wants to
Okay.
speak to.
And Eric, thank you.
Good evening, council. You've heard me over the last several years talk about some of our goals, and we've talked a lot about excellence. I know that we've done a lot of work with a company called the Baldrige Group, and we've met over time with some of the other department directors. And in short, if you may recall, I talked about asking for money, which was a strategic goal, our finances. I talked about supporting our workforce, which was all the things that we needed to address obviously, the workforce, that provided operational excellence, that basically provided that service to a customer and created a safe community. And those were 5 strategic goals. And so in a perfect world, we would come to you as directors and ask you, representing the community, what are the 5 strategic goals of the council? And those goals would be built, and the goals that you have would be our same goals. And our objectives, if you will, and the strategies of how we fulfill those objectives would be aligned with metrics that you're talking about, of why actual measurements. For us, it might be the use of sick time and how that affects the overtime. And that correlation, our response times, and all of the metrics report back to those operational goals, those strategic goals. We've benchmarked Tamarack, City of Tamarack, which is a city that pursues excellence, a Baldrige recognized winner, which is Coral Springs. So again, these are best practices. It's something I have been studying quite a bit, and I think it has great ability to drive the budget process. We've been running the fire department for quite some time, and we're about to evolve our strategic plan within the fire department. Very simple, kind of almost like a one-pager for you to see what our strategic goals are, which I just described to them. And I would encourage you to come by and see what we're doing and how we're measuring those goals. And that can trickle down to the other departments. And really, in a perfect world, you provide that input, and we're all aligned with your goals. So
it can trickle up too.
Well, in a perfect world, it would be trickle down. But,
the message.
That would be good.
I also think that business plans, that concrete, data-driven business plans, help with that mission.
And so the strategic goals ultimately feed the departmental business plans that are a little bit more granular in detail about how we operate. It's a very efficient way for us to operate and for you to kind of look behind the curtains. And the further down you go, the more granular it gets, to the point where you probably don't want to see that level of detail, but I might need it to run my department.
I think for budgeting, we like granular.
We can go.
We've done that, and we would be more, that's helpful. But, you
Well,
know,
but I think, you know, and
we got to the point where we were at one budget process. We went and made the worksheets available to everybody, but that was killing a lot of trees. And at the end of all the policies that we were going through and all the practices that we were trying to put forth, we were still counting pencils and erasers and paper clips. So in moving forward, as Eric points out and what he's convinced me of, we do need to stay much higher than down here. We can supply you with down here. That's easy. That's what we do every day. That's what we do every Monday by looking at that during staff meetings and things like that. If you're more involved, want to be more involved in that, then we start stepping up further.
And so my suggestion is you meet in the middle, and I think.
Then we need to do that sooner.
Exactly, the budget plan with the strategic and the overview of the granular and overview and analysis of data.
So
it's not the, and you know, the total strategic planning and mission and vision and all that, which is great, and it makes an organization. But for budgeting, you need more of a business plan.
Then may I ask that on the 27th of February, we come back to you, you put your ideas together, and we will at that meeting begin the process.
Thank you.
But the process begins by establishing those 4 to 5 goals, and then they funnel out. February 27th.
And then, right, and concrete action.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
I have to inject one more thing here because I think it's interesting that item 3 and item 4 are right next, 2 and 3 rather, right next to each other, the budget process followed by strategic planning. You know, the budget process, and I'm not saying we do this, but to some extent we do. The budget process can simply be, let's look at last year's numbers and plug in X percentage of increase and include some of the things we think we want to do, and here's our new budget. Or it can be much more complex than that and involve a lot of strategic planning. And I think that what we need to do as the governing body is to be much more involved in the strategic planning. For example, instead of Chief Press or Chief Lang coming to us and telling us what they need to do with their departments, which is good, we need that, we should be doing much more analysis of our various departments and finding out what it is we think need to be changed or improved or added or subtracted in the best interest of providing our residents with great services. And I don't think that we've done a lot of that strategic planning from up here. We've been looking for it more coming to us from the department heads. And I think if we want to change something that might make a really big difference, that's what we start with. Giving our vision of what needs to be changed in our major operating departments and in other aspects of the village so that the department heads and the other people that are putting their budgets together can consider that. That to me is the level we ought to be involved in, not the granular, not the pencils and the papers and things like that. It's more of the vision.
And I think, at least I completely agree with you, I think sometimes we get hung up on the pencils and the papers and the stuff because we're looking for the whys and the bigger, you know, the bigger analysis of is this necessary? Where are you going with this? Why is there an increase here? What was your thought? It wasn't about it's about the thought process. Why was it done? Which is the business and strategic planning aspect of
And
it.
if we knew the whys, we wouldn't have to ask it at the budget hearing.
Correct. Which is why I want this.
Exactly.
Yes.
No argument with any of it. I just do want to comment. I feel like we do both recurringly all the time. I think we do the strategy all the time as needs arise. I'll give you a couple of examples, and it's not apparent probably because we do one in executive session, but we talk about the standards that we expect for our uniformed officers. We've talked a lot over the years about the standard of performance we expect for our stormwater management system and the kind of investments we need to make. We've talked all the time about land acquisition. If there's a way to be more systematic and maybe to capture this work that we're doing all the time anyway, I think that's probably a real need. Because if we're wondering whether we're doing this, I think we are, but maybe we could be more systematic about doing
You
so.
do it all the time in a different venue, and it sometimes doesn't filter down into the budget process.
That could
That's
very well
exactly
be.
what I was getting at. When we can take some of the things we've done and plug it into the budget process.
Memorialize it, strategize, and then we're all on the same page.
Exactly.
Well, and I think if it were unified and there was, like you suggested, sort of a template that we became accustomed to, they were accustomed to, that we were always going back to, it could increase the efficiency.
Absolutely. And I know our department heads would like to do our budget meetings in an hour and a half and not in 6, so.
We would probably agree with that.
I agree with that as well. Okay, so folks, just food for thought. Thank you for indulging
We
me.
have a date certain.
Yes.
Next item, dedication policy on the behalf of village residents. Mayor Lindsay.
Sure, and Todd, if you could come up just so we address this a little bit, just as a discussion item. After we authorized as a council the plaque for the tree for the Ferre family, Todd was contacted by 2 other families who had also donated trees on behalf of loved ones in the park, and they asked for plaques. And so this issue are they asked for them to be dedicated?
They had donated the tree in partnership with that other family.
Okay. Oh, so it's one tree.
They
Okay,
were best
it was
friends.
2 families, sorry.
Two
And
different
so-
trees, best
Okay,
friends.
okay.
Same type of tree.
Okay, and so it reminded me that we have on different occasions had discussion about when families or individuals or groups contact the village and they want to make a gift on behalf of someone or a group or to memorialize an event, and that we don't have a policy for this. And we have in the past articulated that we wanted to have a clear policy that was in keeping with what the philosophy of the village is for, greening and for decorations or art or whatever, we thought the priorities were and what was appropriate in terms of, we didn't want, too many naming opportunities. We wanted subtle but people to feel that they had a contribution. Is that, and Frank, you were, and so I wanted to have a discussion, an open discussion on or get our thoughts going, and Todd's been researching it, about what would be appropriate for the village, and can we have a written policy? The things that have been discussed, I guess 20 years ago, individuals were gifting trees, and that's something that is aligned with what our priorities are to consider it. I know we've been approached about benches in the parks. We've been approached about bricks. And we've been approached about art. I know for the art, we at one point, Frank, discussed maybe having individuals work with our art in public places committee, but we need to have this policy and people know what to do if they are interested. And Frank, I think you wanted to add to it.
In my memory, not too long ago, there were 2, let's call them founding families, and John and I worked on this together. In both of these instances, Michael Kahn and Mort Freed. And I think at the time, we had not had a policy theretofore. And I thought we developed at least the rudiments of a policy that included size of some kind of memorialization, materials to be compatible with whatever the thing is affixed to, location. The art example came up in the community center independently and later, and it presented us with a bit of a challenge because it was a bit of an outlier in terms of our kind of art theme. But we found a way to be, gracious and respectful and express gratitude and all of that. Am I remembering correctly?
Yes.
It still hangs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, Todd and I spoke, and he didn't, we don't have a written policy. You may have instituted, it would be good to have something that is clear that individuals can follow and make decisions. I don't know and we've discussed memorializing that.
Did we memorialize it? No. Let's do so.
So, yeah.
So one detail, though, that's come up subsequently that we had talked about as part of the protocol but might not have adhered to is compatible materials. And an example possibly is in the Lake Park, because there's a limestone bench with a kind of a plaque that is not consistent with a limestone bench. It's a metallic plaque. It should be something else, perhaps, to be compatible with the materials. The other, and maybe we could just revisit what we had talked about at the time, because we had talked about not everything everywhere.
But I think you may have had this discussion with John, and we didn't have this full discussion from the dais, and I think we need to have that, because I don't know what the.
And we need the.
What is the policy?
I don't know the policy. I mean, you
You're
know the
saying
policy, but
memorialize
nobody
it.
else
When
does.
is he going to memorialize?
Let's write up what we had and present it to council, and we'll
Yeah,
comment on it.
that's the way we should go about it.
Yes.
Our two focuses have been on the benches and trying to establish, and coming back to council, and trying to establish the bricks. That's been, when the phone rings, that's the first response. There are times, and that has to be through council's direction or approval, there are times when people want to do more. Again, who would have thought that we would be putting a clock, the Dr. Mag's clock out there? And those were brought forth. But we did not memorialize it. You're absolutely correct, and that needs to be done. But again, our first focus was the benches and the bricks.
So let's write it up and present it to everybody and comment on it.
Yeah, the one thing that I would caution against is us becoming Mount Sinai Hospital.
No, and I totally hear about that. I mean, I would.
Seriously.
Everything is naming opportunity.
I mean, looking at the way some of the higher-end cities have done it, the bench is this type. These are the locations where we need a bench, so you could
Right.
donate a bunch that
Yes.
fills this need. Here's where we need a tree. This is the tree we need. You could donate this tree in this location and
Yes.
put a plaque on it.
But again, you know,
Take the brick back.
You'll see a
you don't
map
have,
of.
you know, there are people who do it anonymously and just want to know it's there.
But I want the plaque to say anonymous.
Stop.
You got it.
The Luis de la Cruz Arboretum,
Right.
for example.
I'll bring something back to you. based on
And the
research.
reason is, folks, then we have a mishmash and you have things that, and someone's, you know, subjective eye is beautiful and somebody else doesn't like it in its public place. So let's just,
I mean, the only-
Part of the signage ordinance?
it might be.
Currently, anything beyond what we put in this program would come to council. Is that how you'd like me to formulate this, or would you like a committee that it goes to that?
I don't think we need a committee.
No.
I think whatever you, and then let's
So
discuss.
whatever we have in the program,
you
anything,
looked, whatever you have in the program, but then you also looked at different jurisdictions.
Yes.
So then why don't you do about other suggested best practices?
which is usually comes back to council, like.
Yes,
if a-
no,
if a
all of
clock
that,
or
yes,
something like that
yes.
comes along. Okay,
What we're currently doing, what has been currently been the practice, and then other best practices.
perfect. I'll
Dan,
take care of
one
it.
quick thing, I don't think we ever want to be in a position up here, though, of having to say to somebody, thank you, but we don't want what you want, or we don't like it. I think we have to have strong enough guidelines so that
Correct.
when
And this
someone
is,
comes to Todd, for example, if you're the focal point of this, you'll know what it is we are likely to accept and what we might not be likely to accept, rather than having to either take something we don't want or even worse, embarrass somebody, which we never want to do. So we really need to codify it a little bit better than it is.
Gary, absolutely. I'm with you.
It's not codified at all.
Well, that's, okay, well, a little bit better would be better than where it is.
You got it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Next item, consequences for arrest of minors, what every parent should know, Mayor Lindsay.
You know, after we had the discussion about golf carts and what minor kids are doing, I had a couple of calls. I met with the Vice Consul of Spain, who's very concerned about what kids do, just generally. And one of the things that she voiced and that other parents have voiced is that they really don't know what, you know, what is legal or what the judicial system is in the United States, what is considered illegal, and why you know, arrest and how that can affect you otherwise. And they have articulated that maybe we should do a workshop or bring someone in. I know that the public defender has a program where he discusses these things, even from an immigration point of view and all the different consequences and unintended consequences. So it was just a follow-up to the discussion we have, and maybe this is a good thing for our community, for thought. Yes, Brett?
This is kind of a follow-up of, I guess, the last meeting when we did talk about the golf carts. And I just wanted to bring this up. I think we understood that we didn't really want to ticket the minors in that instance if we didn't have to, but is it possible to basically impound the golf cart if it's caught? And basically the parents have to pay a huge fee to get their golf cart back, basically. And they don't want that to happen again. It's embarrassing, costs money, it's inconvenient. And if that doesn't work, and maybe the minor has a warning, but if that you go over a certain amount of warnings, that's it, man. I mean, you're not getting your license till you're 18, and at that point, when that happens, the parents are given that knowledge of what would happen if that kid did get the ticket. If your child had gotten that ticket, this is what would have happened, and then they would be very aware of it. So that's your warning. Next time it happens, you guys understood it, both of you, the kid and the parent.
And it's $1,000 fine, and it's impounded.
Big fine, and they don't know where the police have your golf cart.
You have to walk home.
Yeah,
take a line back.
Basically, yeah.
You know what? Someone else suggested. I like that idea.
Speaking of juvenile behavior, I don't want to get into this deeply right now, but it might be a subject for conversation about how our kids are behaving in things of bullying and predation and such and the like. Let's visit
talk about it. Let's just in terms of educating our residents and having them understand that this could be extremely serious. From getting to college, getting a job, to immigration consequences, and you can't make it go away in the United States. That's something that people don't understand.
I think any opportunity we have for that type of education and outreach is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Next item, update on permit fees. Councilmember Petros.
Okay, I brought this up mainly because we haven't talked about it, and it's sort of standing out there, and I was hoping that Sergio could tell us where we're at and if you've gotten an update from our consultants, and to make sure that we're still consistent on what we're asking for the permitting fees as a council, as a body. So,
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. JRD, our consultant, is currently working on establishing a permit fee cap. They have requested sample permitting information from us. They have been analyzing, and as of earlier this week, they came back to validate some of the information they've gotten from us. So I suspect they're kind of at the tail end of their analysis for some kind of a recommendation. If council will recall, the presentation was about establishing a single percentage permit fee based on value, but the concern grew that that percentage can grow beyond the cost of services. So the missing puzzle was establishing some kind of a cap, and that's where they're at this point. I suspect that we'll be back before council probably towards the end of the February meeting, and we will most likely be scheduling meetings once again with council members one by one, so we can go over that additional information, and hopefully that is what kind of brings all this together.
I thought we had agreed that we wanted to try to do a price per square foot because we thought that was the most equitable way to administer the fees.
Not every fee can be established on a price per square foot.
Well, I guess specifically new homes and renovations. Not
And I think that's where the cap would come in as a benefit to that. Maintaining everything on a single way of calculating makes it a lot more transparent, a lot easier to calculate and understand. and for us to monitor during the budget process. My thought was that initial presentation geared around that. The only part that was missing was the cap, that without a cap, any permit could grow beyond the cost of our services. So that's what they're analyzing, and they're coming up with what that cap should be to come back and recommend.
Do you guys remember our conversation?
Yeah.
I think it was more than a cap that we were concerned about.
We were concerned about the inequity by doing it with a percentage.
I think I was not here I think I might have been in the meeting that I was sick, but what I wanted to kind of hopefully see from our consultants was giving us a few options. You know, you could do it by square footage, you could do it by percentage, you could do it maybe in a couple other ways that we haven't, maybe some hybrid ways or something, and then tell us what's the pros and cons of all these, and then what is the one that should work. I felt like when we got the report, it was kind of just, this is the way that most people do it, so we should do it this way, right? And it was kind of like the way we already had it. And so I was hoping for a little bit more exploratory side on our consultant to find maybe another way to do it that could be more equitable, that could be more rational. But you may come back and say, look, we found one that's much more rational, but to do it is so complex and it's going to cost us this and we have to hire 10 people. And then we understand, like, okay, we like that idea, but maybe it doesn't work. But I didn't know if I had that information in front of us that we could kind of juggle maybe 3, 4, 5 options of and maybe some kind of thinking out of the box type options to look at. And that's what I was kind of hoping for in that report.
We've talked a lot about best practices, and a lot of thought went into the initial recommendation because staff was involved together with our consultants, bringing together all of our experiences and the many ways that in the past we've calculated permit fees. And our goal was to seek the simplest way that was consistent across the board, that was very transparent, which is the key, and was easy to calculate by our constituents as well as by our staff and minimize time. Today, the rigors of calculating a permit fee is unimaginable, and it's way too much. And the only thing that really, the major thing that came back to me at least, was the biggest concern about there not being a cap. That based on any kind of permit arrangement, fees would tend to go beyond the cost of our service. So that was really, to us, that was the missing link. That was what was missing in this equation, was how do we cap this permit fee so that it's still equitable to our customers and remains revenue neutral.
Because I understand that, and if we ended up in that position after looking at maybe the few different options and some out of the box, it makes sense. But the problem that I'm having is that I have residents that ask me, if you do it that way, this doesn't work because of that. And they're right. And then they say, you should do it this way. And then I tell them, well, this might have an issue. Then maybe there should be a hybrid. I don't know. It would be so much easier to tell them, like, look, we looked at these 5 things. And the reason why we're here is because this one didn't work because of this. This one doesn't work because of that. And we ended up in this. And it could be back in the same best practices. But I was hoping they would think a little bit out of the box. I was thinking at some point, I might even mention it to you, and it might be so complex it doesn't work. But could you do it by inspection that you're going to be required? So let's say that if you have a residential project that's going to need a new toilet, a new air conditioner, and putting in new floors, you might just need a building inspection, a plumbing inspection, a mechanical inspection. And on renovations, there might be a flat rate for each of those reviewers and each of those inspections, or at least the reviewers. It might be very complex to do it that way, but it takes a difference when you're doing a renovation or a new house, whether you need everybody, public works, structural, everybody that's inside the department to be on top of your project versus somebody who just needs 2. And if they just need 2 in a renovation, and there could be an average, figuring out kind of what the average is over so many years. But again, I would love the consultants to look at it and to tell me, great thinking out of the box, but that doesn't work. And tell you why it doesn't work. But that would help me so much more to go back to the residents and say, guys, we thought out of the box. It really, the best way to do it is per square foot.
One of the most significant pieces of information presented by our consultants last time was that 90% of our residential permits fell within a certain range of $0 to $50,000, which ended up being a $200 permit fee. And 75% of our commercial permits fell within the same range at $290 a permit, which is very reasonable, and it takes care of 90 and 75% of our customers. And it still kept a very simple process because percentage base is the simplest form. It's also the simplest form for you all to understand how it's being done, because all it is two numbers divided by each other and you get the percentage. And that's basically the division's expense versus the amount of valuation. And that's the very simple, very transparent. Anything else is very difficult to translate into how do you derive at this number. And how complex it is then to apply, even if it is a square foot basis. When you apply a square foot basis, you have to actually go in and calculate the square footage. Whereas all permits require a value, because we have to assess a value, a percentage for the county surcharge and the state surcharge. So every permit has to have a value.
Hopefully they give you the correct value.
And hopefully it is. And we can validate that, but every permit has to have a value. So the number's already given, you plug it into a simple formula and you get a permit fee. It's as easy as that. Can't be any easier than that, to be quite honest. And we found that the majority of our permit business falls within a very reasonable permit fee for a whole host of permit types across the board. And that cap is going to take care of that concern for those higher end projects, which conceivably go beyond the cost of us servicing it. And I think that's where the safeguard, was needed.
Two things that I remember from our conversation. Number one, I remember Councilmember Gross saying that even if it takes a little bit more work, we need to do something that's fair, and that was really important. And we asked this consultant to go back and look at this differently, and I don't remember it just being about caps. So have they gone and looked at it in a different way, and will we be presented with an alternative?
And we'll see what they come back with as far as a recommendation after they're done doing their research.
You might want to give them a heads up.
Well, the process is that once we get that final report, we are going to do what we said we were going to do and set aside time where both my director and my vendor can sit across from one or more of you at a time and go through the process, get the questions answered, so that when we come back on the 27th for final action, those questions are answered. And if during those questions, there's the need to take a look at something else that you created, they'll be ready to do that immediately.
But shouldn't we give them as a courtesy of like, listen, you may want to have two options or justifications? I mean, otherwise, we're still caught up in this no action phase.
I thought we did, but if it's necessary to reinforce the message that you're remembering very specifically, and so am I, please do.
Yep.
It is necessary to reinforce it, because this entire conversation, the first time the word fair came up is when Katie just mentioned it. And if you recall, that's the reason I raised this in the first place last year, and long before you were even here, Sergio. We had a system that was patently unfair and was totally out of control. And easy to calculate is fine, but that's trumped by fair. And we have to have a system that makes sense in terms of a reasonable fee for reasonable services. So maybe it's more difficult to calculate that. Maybe we will have to end up with a system where here's the project and here are the inspections that need to be done, and here's how much each of these inspections generally cost, and here's what we're going to charge you for it. And if it takes more time to do that, as opposed to multiplying one number times another number, well, so be it. If it takes that to get to a place where we're fair and equitable with everyone out here, that's our main goal and objective. And while a cap helps, remember, I only suggested that cap, and I pushed really hard for it, because it was the only way to quickly solve the problem on a temporary basis until we could get to a better system. So maybe a cap would be something that's necessary in the end, but it certainly can't be the primary factor that dictates what we charge. And I really do believe that it would be a good idea to update our consultants and make sure they understand that the word fair is the primary consideration in the plan they come up with. We had a very untenable situation, and we had to fix it. And we did it with a really quick stopgap by putting a cap on things. And I think that we don't really want to pay a consultant to come back to us the same thing we did on the fly a year ago. So, good idea to give them the heads up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, Mini Zoning Ordinance Review Committee, ZORC, Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Briefly. We last spoke at our last meeting. Brett and I started the process of trying to articulate what we would want to do substantively to take a look at our zoning code in an efficient and targeted way. Most of this lies in 3100. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's about 13 categories. We spoke last time about incentives that manipulate the FAR calculation and the need, not the desire, the need to relook at those things, taking into account modern where we are now. I want to talk about really quickly about just getting started. And I think that what I'd like to suggest is that we do this in conjunction with the ear work that the manager has already begun, and take a look, as Brett had suggested at the last go-around, which I think is exactly the right thing, to combine this with a fresh look at the 2020 vision statement and plan, which is not terribly long or complicated, but which informs what we need to do for the ear analysis, and do it all together, start tomorrow. I think we can do this in 4 or 5 chunks, working with Chad, hopefully, and Sergio, and maybe Bill Fair. And as we progress, maybe from workshop to workshop or meeting to meeting, bring it back to council so that we're all keeping up with the thinking in progress, and we can all get to a result maybe in 2.5 months or so, and get this done.
I would love to put it to a date certain, put the pressure to get it done.
We had talked about starting with, maybe just to refresh our recollection of the type of design incentives that lead to FAR bonuses. Take a little tour around the island and see what they are, and see what they've resulted in terms of what gets built. That'll get the juices flowing. And there's some other things that are not per se design, but they pretty much fall within 3100 and the correlative sections that deal with other zoning districts. It's not a lot.
I think it's also appropriate, though, to set up a small committee of 5 experts in the community to participate.
Well, let me ask you to reflect on that, all of us, because I think we were specifically decided not to do that this time around. I like committees, as you know. I favor including people. But this process is going to be a discrete process. It's not like 2007. There's not a lot to cover. But if we will have a public process, we need to.
Well, I think it is about public process. Exactly.
We need to have we always have a public process. We're a public entity. We have to work in the public.
Right.
But the question of having a committee formed begs the question of to do what that we're not going to do in real time in public anyway, in a discrete and limited duration project. The ear.
How is it going to be in public, Frank?
Because we're going to have public meetings. We have to have public meetings. We have to notice them.
Everything we do is
We're going to have to notice them. We're going to have an agenda. We're going to have to send it out in advance, and the agenda is going to say, tonight we're going to discuss 3100 3F, and it's going to describe what that is and how it fits in with everything else that we're talking about. So it's just a decision. I like committees, but I don't know that we're going to do this as we intended initially if we're going to open this up to a committee process.
I mean, I guess if you open up the committee process, we're not looking at completing this in 3 months, basically, right? I mean, in 3 months, we may have the committee assembled.
Well,
No.
how many different things are we really going to be looking at? You know, I mean,
My list is 13 items in 3,100, 30,
Just those
33. And then in the other zoning districts, 3,100 is single-family and two-family. In the other zoning districts, there's a few instances where sections in those districts correlate to what we need to talk about in the residential district. We probably want to talk about transferable development rights because of things that we've discussed in recent years, which is another section. We can't talk about definitions without requiring a vote of the electorate, because that's what the charter amendment prescribes.
There were some administrative issues that I think Bill Fair and Sergio brought up at one point, and maybe we can look a little bit closer at what they were.
They're all on the list.
Okay.
Please consider that we can set a committee in 2 weeks. There are people who work in this community who are very much affected and who understand it very well and would at least like to be part of the process. And historically, it's been done by committee. 5 people work nimbly. It's just about, doing a public, transparent process.
How are you? Were you thinking about having separate meetings other than up here on the dais with the?
That's what it sounds, and that
We would have
makes me
separate
feel.
meetings.
Yes, I don't think this is.
We have a ad hoc type committee that just are like these small workshops that we have, that those 5 people know that we're going to have this workshop, and they come and they sit with us while we go through this and we work together on it, but not a formal village council committee.
That's exactly what we had talked about.
encourage whatever people you
Those
want
people.
to be involved.
I don't know if that's a possibility.
I know that the members of the former Zork are, not everyone is still here, but those that are would, I
And
think,
we've
want to
talked
participate.
about even bringing one person from the outside who has kind of fresh eyes.
Sure. I think what Vice Mayor Kaplan is saying is that we typically, from my side, is that we would have a village council committee in order to do something for us that we may not have time for us to get done, and we need to get some of that advisory help, that research work, stuff done for us. I think what you're saying in this instance is that we could do this ourselves. We don't need a separate committee doing the same work that we would be doing. However, I think what you're saying is just to ensure that we have the public process, the public input there. But I don't know if you need a committee, or we can make sure that, we can select 5 people to make sure that, these are people who are experts, and have them be included into whenever we're meeting to be there and make sure that they're there with us.
What I have found in my life's experience is if we do a good job, people are going to come because they're going to be interested.
And you can call those people that you want involved.
Well,
I would
it
like them to be there. I don't
mean,
want it just to be 2 of us.
It should be more than just them, but I think
Anybody.
there should be a core group that you want the feedback from because they are critical to the process, because this is about process. And then, of course, it's open and very well advertised, and it's open to the public, but you need that kind of core group of I just think that's a best practice. That's the way we've done it, and I think there's a reason for that. We can move very, very nimbly and get it done. And I know, Frank will run a tight ship, but I think we should be doing a better, open process.
Whether we do it formally or not, it will happen that way. But I would be the last person here to say, no, I love committees.
I know, I think Frank's the number one with committee, so if he's saying no committee, that's why I'm thinking
I don't
really be needed in this instance.
It's going to be the same regardless, but I would never say no committee.
You did say no committee.
We talked him into it. We talked him into it. This is why it's good to have
We have to
discussion.
schedule, we have to do this the same way we did it before. but it's more discreet, it's more
Listen,
limited.
you want an ad hoc committee and you call the people, that's fine, but we have to document.
I think it's
just.
if we,
we're going to
can we more faster than 3 months.
And we're going to include 2020.
You can. If you have 3 or 5 people, it goes quickly.
So Chad just
We're at
reminded us
7.
that we have an EAR deadline in July. The EAR, so just, do you know that the EAR still, despite the change in the law, we have to assess our compliance with our own comp plan in every particularity.
No, we have to assess our comp plan to make sure that it's updated to comply with changes in state law.
We have the flood risk thing, but included in the work that we need to do in this year is how well have we followed our comp plan? How well have we
That's not a
achieved?
requirement of the EAR any longer under state law. You guys can do it, but under the state law, the way they changed it, because remember, the whole.
We went through this last time we did the year because the law had changed. And
The
it was
last time we did this was 07?
7 years ago.
Is it every 10 years or
Every
every
7 years.
Okay.
It's every 7 years, and
11.
law changed really
In the
because
11.
Tallahassee wanted to get out of the business of having
That's
to
right.
do it. So the law says that every 7 years now, the government needs to go through your comp plan and make sure that your comp plan speaks to all the changes that have occurred in state law in the interim. And if you don't do that, then you can't amend your comp plan. That's the penalty.
So is it also the case that one thing that is a new element that's important is the flood risk mitigation?
Well, one element is that you do need to consider sea level rise as a part of development, which is not really what you're saying, but that is a requirement that's going to go into our plan that's been put in the state law that we're going to have to incorporate in.
So think about whether you want a committee or not, but we need to do a public process and we need to get started.
Well, the EAR's being done,
The EAR is being done.
Is being
It
done.
Needs our input.
and it will, but that's well in its way, and John will give us an update if
And I
needed.
think Brett's suggestion about doing.
But those are 2 different things.
I want them
A
to be
minis
on,
or, they should
I
be,
want them to be on simultaneous tracks.
well, they are, but they're 2 different things, but they should be a coordinated effort, just like a master plan for for the parks and public places should be part of this coordinated effort.
The intellectual work that we need to put into this will be the same intellectual work
For all 3.
for 3 tracks,
For all
2020, EAR, and zoning.
Let me just give some advice on this. There are going to be probably changes that are required by the EAR that are going to require us to amend our zoning code as a result of it. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt to go hand in hand, but the EAR is going to have a report that's going to articulate what needs to be done. Then the village council is going to have a certain amount of time to adopt the comprehensive plan amendments necessary to get it done, and then you're going to have to amend your zoning code to implement it. So I think it makes sense to do it simultaneously, as Frank is suggesting. But once July 18th or July of 2018 comes, you finish your EAR, you submit it to the state, you're going to then know what you're going to have to do additional changes in addition to the ones that you're saying to the zoning code.
I think that we will.
Fair enough. I think.
Here's my crystal ball. We are going to be able to prognosticate with something approaching perfect clarity what we need to do in zoning. And if we are missing something, we're going to know it in August.
Jenny, remember this.
Mr. Clairvoyant.
So let's get started. We need to set up a process and start scheduling.
We'll do an ad hoc committee. We'll be ready for appointments if you guys want to make suggestions and have people contact us.
And Frank, can you put together maybe just a quick how you see this from beginning to end and what
Timeline?
what type of meetings and stuff like that we could have together and
Yeah,
how and when?
I'll do that. And I'll also identify the items in 3100 that I've identified.
That'd be great. I'll go through it too if I find anything.
Please share that with everyone so we're all on the same page.
Next item, evaluation appraisal report EAR. Vice Mayor.
Same thing. We
Yes,
just discussed
done.
it.
Next item, discussion on entry block. Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Okay. I wanted to offer a couple of insights. We might consider these separate propositions or related propositions. To me, they're related and they cause me to make a suggestion. And I would ask you to assent to what I'm going to suggest. The first proposition is the entry block was purchased in 2015. It's been just sitting there since the acquisition. I think we're all aware of the fact that at various stages along the way, the ownership group had put in some design time and spent some money on different possible commercial developments. None of which have come forward, nothing has come forward, and it sits. It sits since 2015 sometime. But we might reflect on the notion that the ownership group didn't have in mind, a crabgrass farm, that something is going to happen on this property sometime. And if that comes along and there's a development application and an application for site plan approval submitted, we'll deal with it. We'll do our job. But it occurs to me, and I suggest to you, that it would be desirable, I think, if possible, and with the agreement of the ownership group, if possible, to forestall for a time commercial development of the property, so that they can think of what they might want to do with it, and we can think of what we might want to do with it as a public purpose, without pressure and the anxiety associated with having a development application drop on us that we might not prefer. It is conceivable to me that given all of the attention that we're putting into getting people to drive less, and all of the investment that we're putting into freebie and trolley and transit and Lime Bike, it's conceivable to me, although it's completely speculative now, that at some point in time, the circumstances that affect the traffic circulation and congestion might improve, which would, if that happens, who knows, make for a different universe of possibilities and a different site plan review process, potentially. That's not happening now, but it could. It could as time goes by. In the meantime, while all that is sort of simmering as a pregnant possibility, over the time that we've been together in this council in these past 2 terms, we've discussed a whole variety of public purpose possibilities for the entry block, none of which have gelled, but all of which are still possibilities. Library is an example. We've discussed something to better connect a community center, park, library, combination of things with Calusa. The connection to the tennis center and the golf course through an easement, so that you could ride your bikes down and maybe take advantage of the tennis center, whatever's going to happen to that property, and others. Satellite parking, a whole variety of things have come up. Sustainability, installations possibly in the meantime. So while this is in a sense dormant in terms of what's going to happen in the future of the entry block, I think if the ownership would agree, we could lease the property from them with an option to purchase the property if we elect to, with the right of first refusal to give us the right to buy the property if the ownership group decides to sell it, for some period of time, under some terms to be negotiated, which I believe we have a good prospect of doing very quickly and very easily, and bring it back to council and see whether the terms make sense and whether it's the kind of thing that our council would choose to do to put a pin in the entry block and allow us, all of us, the ownership group and our council and the community, to weigh in on what the future might be for the entry block without the threat of a development application that might be premature, might not be, what the best possible use of it is. If it's driven by economic anxiety or some sense of desperation, that often tends to lead to things that aren't optimal. And so I think this is actually the best possible idea that I can conceive of to forestall something bad happening at the entry block. So I'd like to do this, and I'd like to bring it back and see in the form of a draft whether it's acceptable.
What do you see us doing with leased property?
Figure out what our use would be, if anything. As I mentioned, a number of possible uses, all of which are public purpose, have surfaced for a long time. By the way, the long time predates their ownership. When the prior owner purchased the property, we had that discussion then, and our council at that time rather regretted our inability, collective inability, to do exactly what I'm suggesting right now then. So
My recollection is there was a very large resident movement to, ask the village to buy the entry block. And that was it was a big group of
yes,
old-time
yes,
influencers and founders.
At the time, it was.
But I don't know that and by the way, thank you. I think this is great and interesting, and but I don't know with Katie what the purpose would be for the lease.
The purpose. Go ahead.
If I might, we really can't do anything with the property if we're leasing it for a short period of time. What we can do, and I think Frank really, and that was the key point you were making, what we can do is give ourselves time to see if we really have some very valuable use for that property that would cause us to want to buy it, and in the meantime, forestall a commercial project from being proposed for that property, which may not be desirable to the community, but which may, based on our zoning laws, be something that we ultimately have to approve. And I wish kind of that you had talked about item 10 before item 9, because to me, if we really are going to be serious about the library, and if we really are going to become our own library, I would much rather build our own building on our own piece of property within our village limits and operate that as a library and whatever else we wanted to incorporate into the building, than try to do something in the existing library site, which does have its problems and it does have its objectors and all of this other. So maybe we should sort of talk about that. As I sit here right now, the most feasible and the most practical and the most likely use for this property would be exactly that, a site for our library, if in fact we can move forward with it. And from what I understand, we do have a path to be able to opt out of the system, and we do have a path to be able to build our own library, and we also have a path to recoup the library taxes that we're currently paying to Dade County and use that source of revenue, which is, I think, $2.3 million a year right now, not only to finance the debt incurred in buying the property and building the building, but still have money left over to operate. So to me, these are one and the same.
With your permission, let's merge them.
I'd love to.
Can I bring up one thing before you get into the library? I like the idea of exploring this. I would like to also not take off the table the exploration of a public-private partnership, because there could be a possibility there that, we have developers that may want to develop a certain section of it, and another part that gets developed that's for a use of the city, and could be a long-term partnership that we could look at.
I think it's almost certain that that would be a term, and it would be optional on both sides, but I think that's implicit. In part because I believe, I don't mean to speak for anybody else, but I believe that they don't have any concrete plans at this moment. Neither do we. So we can either we can make an offer to purchase the property. If we're going to do anything proactive and, if you will, defensive, what are the things that we can do? We can make an offer to buy it. Personally, I'm not ready to do that because we don't know what we're going to use it for. But if we take it under lease with a right of first refusal and a purchase option, and if the terms make sense, and we leave open that possibility, the possibility that I'd like to speak to in a moment about the library, and any other possibility that we've yet to conceive we have options. Library. So as you all know, everything Gary said is correct in my view, in my opinion. Everything you've said is correct. You saw prior to somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas a draft of an ILA. Right before Christmas, or sometime before Christmas, the week before, we delivered that to the library director. I think it's a very good job. I think we presented ourselves, very rationally, the economics, everything about it, the programming, the purpose, it's all sensible. The reaction that I believe has come forward thus far is informal, preliminary, and incomplete. It's pretty much good job, but we're not sure about the cost reimbursement at 100%. Now, we're going to care about that when the time comes to talk about cost, because our whole rationale is that this is a cost per foot that's consistent with what the library's typical budget is on a new library. It's predicated on the notion that we need a new library as recognized by the library system, and we have to front-end load the cost because they don't have a capital budget. So if you connect all of those dots and honor the truth of that rationality, that's 100% hard cost reimbursement. And, in fairness, we built in soft cost responsibility for the village, although the library system has already absorbed some of the soft costs in doing their original architectural design. They did that in-house. The idea that we left with, you remember, our proposition was, thank you for carrying the ball this far. We'll take it from here. We'll develop the ILA, which we've done. We'll work on our financing. Tell us what you think, but we're in the game. Gary, and I'd like to continue this with sincerity, in good faith. This is a possibility, but I think that our optimal play is not on that site because we are space limited on that site to a degree that I think we will be left with something less than optimal for our projected needs. I think that's already clear. And we're not going to want to ruin the landscaping, probably. And even if we did, we'd still be space constrained. And I think that it's possible that we're going to come to the conclusion that the library the entry block is the right site for this. And also, if this was part of either a larger structure or a complex of structures, including a community, performing arts center or the like, things that we've been talking about, what would we do with them and where would we put them, still remaining open questions. The only place is the entry block if we were going to make those decisions. So I think we'd have the flexibility to do exactly what you say and the economic latitude to support our doing so.
So I think if we can, I'm sorry, just to continue this dialogue, and I won't say any more. If we can negotiate something which we believe is a fair and reasonable price to give us the time to finish exploring the library and maybe bring it to fruition. And reasonable price is really the operative word here. I don't know what that is at this point, but it's not a tremendous amount of money in my mind. And I think it's something we should seriously consider. So maybe, obviously you've had a dialogue. If you can keep that dialogue going and bring something back that's a little bit more concrete for us to consider, I think it's something that could very well be in our best interest to consider.
What I'd like to do, if you agree, is not bring back talk, but bring back a draft and do it fast.
Great.
And then we'll know whether we like it or not.
While we're doing that, I think that we need to keep in mind the lot that we're talking about and the limitations that lot has that has kept it from being developed.
Yes.
And has a lot to do with how you access it and how you get in and out, obviously. So got to be very conscious of that, because if we're talking about a library that obviously it's for the Key Biscayne residents, and they're all going to have to go off the key in order to come back in to use it. It's a little bit of a significant limitation.
I appreciate that. I know.
So you got to, it's a lot, it's like great ideas, but got to keep in mind what's doable there. And I think that Brett, as an architect, probably has more ideas about that than any of us, but be careful with what,
And in terms of the library property, it was deeded to the county for the purpose of a library. It's got a reverter clause.
Yes.
What happens?
We're going to have to explore what's going to happen.
Okay, because to me, I wouldn't want to lose that
we have a
public
problem there
building.
instead of at the entry block.
No, we have to solve for that.
So that, to me, is something that we really need to be.
I don't foresee, whatever we do, I don't foresee disconnecting altogether from the library. This is not a divorce. This is, if we do what you've alluded to, I don't think this is a divorce. I think this is a new age, and we're going to have an interlocal agreement, and we're going to have to figure out what it's going to say.
A legal separation.
Legal separation.
I just had a couple thoughts. First of all, we have good momentum going with the director of the library system, and we've been acting in good faith with him, and likewise back.
Yes.
And I think that's great. And moving your idea forward, if we were to lease this land, we can't put a building on it because we're leasing it. So then that would require a purchase, which creates a long degree of time to make something happen. So are we going to lose our momentum with what we've done so far if we were to shift gears? And then secondly, that property that's deeded to Dade County, I found out it's about 50,000 square feet. It's over an acre. I mean, it's a significant amount of land. And the other thing is, if we redevelop that area, we may have the ability to ease traffic in that little congestion spot, not to make something worse. And when I think about the entry block, I don't know how we add something there, a community building that doesn't make traffic worse.
So thank you for that. I recognize and agree with that. In thinking about any use on the entry block, differentiate anything we could conceivably talk about from the commercial use that would be highest and best, as of right entitlement, putting aside the site plan problems that Luis mentioned. It can't get worse than a commercial development. Secondly, I said this, I want to keep going, I want to keep our momentum. I don't want to disconnect from our discussions. And I want to do it sincerely and in good faith, as you just said. This, to me, is, it's again a simultaneous track. We'll figure out what our best move is while we go down the track with Ray. But I propose to have an option, a landing zone, if we decide that that's the better use for us. And it might not be a library. We've discussed a whole number of things for the entry block as a possibility.
I do like the idea of leasing it to take away any concern about some quick thing happening because of economic stress.
And we're not going to buy it now, so this is the only thing that makes sense.
But actually, if as opposed to slowing down or stopping momentum, if we had a lease with an option to purchase at a prearranged option price, in my mind, it would actually speed things up because we've already got the contract in place. And there won't be any negotiations or haggling over dollars or anything else. It's just like, okay, we're ready to exercise our option, sign, and we're going. So I think it has the opposite effect. It really gives us total control for the period of time of the lease at hopefully not a real expensive price.
I mean, I'd like to see us do something nice with that passively if we were to do that. I mean, we would have to invest some money to make it an area, if nothing more. It'll be our new 530. I don't know.
Pump track.
There you go.
No, passive.
I think we need to we need to go to the next step and to find out what kind of money we're talking about. I mean, unless you guys have already had discussions.
We
on
have
it.
not.
Okay, so,
Well,
you know what I
let's-
mean?
please bring it
That-
back.
That I
That
think
would
is
be
the most
wonderful.
important thing.
That is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also possible that it's not a purchase. It could be a joint venture, as Brett suggested, but we won't know till we know. But we're not going to have an opportunity to know any of this or do anything about it if we're not proactive.
Bring something back.
Thank you.
Next item is potential council liaison for village manager search. Councilmember McCormick.
Okay, so this, I'm not advocating one way or another. I wanted to have a discussion about what people thought, if it's a good idea, a bad idea, worthwhile. We've done it for other things. It occurred to me when our newly selected,
Headhunter.
yeah, thank you, asked who do I talk to? And I wasn't sure exactly how it was done in the past, so I wanted to have a discussion about whether or not we think this is something
Sure.
worthwhile.
I think actually it's a pretty structured process, and he needs to come in or contact each individual council member because we all have different ideas. We're going to want to participate in, for example, the job description, our expectations, and putting together the brochures, our priorities. That, to me, every single person has to participate, and he will come in, or, it will be set appointments that are set up. To have one liaison, you might have a chilling effect on discussion with other people. And I'm not sure that, we want to make it as open again and public and a lot of participation. We actually will probably get feedback from our residents as well. So I think in this case, it's not appropriate, and he should be making the efforts to contact all of us and engage all of us. Yes.
I have a quick question, and I should
Yes.
have asked this last night, but I would really like to hear from both Vice Mayor Kaplan and Mayor Lindsay on what you think we should be focusing on with this search, this person that we've selected, our headhunter, and how we can do this process well, because we really haven't had a discussion about that collectively.
I think having a job description of what we expect. We have a couple of, large capital improvement project, potentially the undergrounding, which is very important. So you're going to want to have someone that has dealt with big public works projects.
But more
and this kind of
specifically,
stuff.
I'm sorry to interrupt, is how he's going to go out and find candidates, and how do we ask specific questions?
Well, and the other thing is, education, experience. Education is going to be critical. How does he go? I think we should cast the net to a national search. Yes. And
That's what he's going to do anyway.
Right.
Yeah, this is just the way I look at it. I suppose that one reason that we selected the gentleman that was WD, who I hope lives up to his namesake by having a well-oiled process, is because there was something about his presentation that caused me to think that his discretion would be good, that he would be wise in channeling from us the personal characteristics. The educational stuff and the experience, I think, is kind of generic, because do you remember I said something about not just qualified, but the right fit? And he got that, and he spoke to that. So I think that what we need to do is think very critically about the type of personality, the type of service orientation, that sort of quality of rapport that we think is applicable in dealing with high service demands. I think generosity, being giving of yourself and doing above and beyond what the job description asks for and things of that sort is probably an intrinsic necessity in this job. I think you probably agree with that. And telling them these things and maybe backing them up with examples, and sometimes those examples might include instances where we think we could do better. You know, that's, but giving him that specifically, it's personal. It's the thing that his discretion is going to draw from, as I see. I hope that helps.
I'm sorry.
That's the way I see it.
No, I know, that captures who you are, Frank. I just thought that was very nice, very good, and very frank, you know?
Okay.
As it were.
As it were.
Yes.
Next item, master plan discussions, parks and public places. Mayor Lindsay.
This was to go along with the ear and the discussion of the mini Zork. When we had a workshop on our land acquisition committee and where we wanted to go with it, we discussed putting together a master plan for parks and public spaces as a priority. We were going to link that with the ear process, and I just want to make sure that that is yet another track that is concurrent. I think it's the right time, it's good use of our resources, and it also falls into our 2020 vision and a review of where we want to go.
All together.
All together.
That's a Beatles song.
I think that's, do we have another item?
I think the bus.
Village under the manager's report.
Mayor and council, if I may, I need some guidance on a little challenge. Our newly purchased bus has become a hit with the community.
Our what?
Our newly purchased bus has become a hit with our community, to the point where there has been an unusual request for the bus to be used that I have not faced as being manager, and I don't even know that we've faced it up to this point. I'd like Todd to take a couple of seconds to give you an overview, and then I'll seek guidance on how to deal with the challenge.
Bachelor party or?
Yeah, I was wondering what
We've already done that.
We took the poll.
At a youth athletics advisory board meeting, the rugby group requested that the bus be used to take them to a Naples tournament. We've never done that. We've always had parents drive their own children. And because when I came to you to purchase the bus, I told you exactly how I was going to use that bus. And this will be a big departure from what I told you the purpose of that bus was. I wanted to bring it to your attention. And because potentially if one group uses it, it's going to be going on weekends.
Every weekend.
Every weekend, so it's a big departure from what we've done in the past. So it's a policy decision that I want to
How
bring to your
has the
attention.
bus been used to now, and how far does it usually go?
It's for the seniors and the adult programs. The times when we use it for athletics,
What have you done with the seniors in the adult program?
daytimes, night-times, weekends.
What have you done? Details. I feel like
we
I'm
go to
dealing
the-
with my teenage kid.
Yeah, we go to the play, we go to the different shows, we go to the museums, we go
How much was that bus?
It was 120,000?
You mentioned weekends. Have you gone on overnight trips?
No.
No, okay. I'm just, because I think it's a public asset, and I don't personally feel comfortable with all the different groups taking it. I think parents usually charter or rent, and that's what I've done with my kids.
It's also a
For liability. You know, another bus.
We've
I mean,
only
can we
used
rent
it
ours?
for the
Or
events
your
run
programming
through-
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
programs
your
from the community
programming
center.
stuff.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, what's appropriate. That's what I was trying to get at.
That was the guidance we were looking for.
You're opening a floodgate, and also you have situations where it's optional tournament, where it's going to be club activities, where it's things that it's no longer for the public it becomes a little too private,
Seems kind of
Well,
and it seems.
but, okay. I'm not sure I have that big of an objection to it. How bad is the liability aspect? Have you inquired? Is it increase our insurance?
I'll have to check with our insurance, because that's one thing I didn't do, but that's a good point. I could do that. We wouldn't be able to drive it because I don't have staff here every weekend. We would have to hire chauffeur service.
The program that uses it would have to hire it.
Well, I would like to use somebody that.
Right, but I mean, they would pay for it.
They would pay for it, but it would be the person that I choose.
Allison?
The only way I could see this working would be if there were a fee involved. Because of the wear and tear on the vehicle, it's not a community center event. I mean, there is an opportunity there, if that's the kind of business that we want Todd to be getting into, that if a local sports team wants access to the bus and wants to pay the fee to use it for the weekend and it's not otherwise in use, there's an opportunity there for it to be a revenue source.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Or a strict policy decision that we just simply don't do it.
I agree with that. How do you feel about it?
It's a departure from what I've done in the past.
Do you want to do it or don't you want to do it?
I'm concerned with it. I am, because, first of all, if you told me to purchase a bus that was going to take kids to athletic programs, I wouldn't have purchased the bus that I purchased.
Okay.
I purchased a bus to serve the clients that it's serving, and it's not a durable, it's a high-class bus.
So that's the answer?
That's the answer.
That's the answer.
Thank you. Thank you for being honest and giving us what we needed.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.